9 people? That's a lot. It feels like a whole baseball team. When I was young, I always dreamed of having a cute house with a white dog, just like in storybooks. But real life isn't always so nice. I finally got my own house, but when I came back from work, it was full of people, like a dormitory. I'm not happy about it. My name's Mary, and I'm 32 years old. I work in an office. I've been really focused on my job, but lately all my friends have been getting married one after another. Buying wedding gifts has been expensive. I started feeling like I needed to find someone too, so I started going on dates. Mary, when are you going to give me grandkids? Every time I went home, my dad David would ask this, and it made me really uncomfortable. So, I started visiting less. My mom died when I was young, so I grew up with my dad, my brother, and my grandparents. My brother got married early and lives near our old home. He has 2 daughters, my cute nieces. I already have nieces at my brother's. Isn't that enough? But we always argued about it. Then my dad got in a car accident. When I reached the hospital, he was in bad shape. He passed away quietly while my brother's family and I were there. Dad, I wanted you to meet someone. I had a boyfriend introduced by a friend. He just proposed and we decided to marry. He liked to show off a bit, but he was kind. His name was Richard. Now that both my parents are gone and my brother has his own family, it does feel lonely, doesn't it? I said softly while petting my cat Lucy, just back from the funeral. Mary, you're not alone. You're part of my family now, Richard said, holding my hand gently. He was worried about me and came to check on how I was doing. Let's make a happy home together, I thought. Maybe I could find simple happiness. Little did I know what was coming. Welcome. It's a bit crowded though. I went to Richard's family home for a meeting. Patricia, his mom, was lively and straightforward. I felt a bit nervous walking in, thinking it would just be his parents, but there were lots of people, in-laws, step-grandparents, Richard's brother Charles, his wife Sarah, and their kids Thomas and John. Nice to meet you. That's a big group. The house, built by Richard's dad James, was a bit old and worn, but the family was so welcoming, it calmed my nerves. On the way home in the car, I mentioned how many people there were. Christmas or Thanksgiving must be quite something, I said to Richard, who chuckled in response. It really is crowded. I can't believe they live like this every day. I was genuinely surprised to hear this. Richard's family home was never big, and I thought it was just for gatherings. 8 people in that house, wow, Richard said. Originally, it was just his in-laws and step-grandparents. But then Charles, who couldn't keep a job, moved in with Sarah and their kids without asking. Charles will probably move out once he finds a job, Richard said, laughing. Back then, I thought Richard's family just had some challenges. After we got married, Richard and I, along with our cat Lucy, lived a peaceful life without kids yet. Richard helped around the house, and Lucy liked us. Charles and his family still lived in that crowded house. The walls were covered in children's drawings, and Patricia laughed, saying she stopped trying to clean them long ago. Sarah, Charles's wife, always looked tired. She was older than Charles and close to my age, so we became friends quickly. Hey Sarah, hurry up. Mary, don't just stand there. We're out of beer. Whenever I visited, it felt like Sarah and I were the only ones not sitting down. We were always busy, and I wondered if this was our fate. But the idea of Sarah doing this every day was scary. Sarah worked full-time to make up for Charles, who didn't work much. I was hesitant, but I finally asked, have you thought about leaving him? I've thought about it. It's tough. But we have kids, and he used to be kind, Sarah replied. I couldn't see any good in Charles, but I guess they had their reasons. That's what I thought. Around this time, Richard suggested, how about we build our own house? I was surprised but happy. I've always dreamed of living in a cute house like in storybooks with a white dog in the yard. I had never told anyone, but when I told Richard, he said, that sounds great. We spent our free time visiting model homes, choosing a builder, and a year later, our dream home was ready. We need to keep up with the mortgage, Richard said. Definitely, I replied with a smile. On the first weekend in our new home, Richard's family came over for a housewarming party. Here, Joseph, give them the gift. We're coming in. Oh, what a nice house. Patricia seemed really happy, like it was her own place. I smiled politely. Look, it's a party. Then Joseph handed me 2 cans of beer, like he just bought them. Charles wandered around and found our bedroom, saying, this bed is so comfy. He jumped on it, and the kids joined in, getting excited. Look, there's a cat. They ran around chasing our cat, Lucy. Lucy is friendly, but she's never met so many people at once, so she got scared and hid in the back of the room. Poor Lucy. I looked at Charles and Richard, who were already busy with the party. Mary, Patricia wants appetizers soon. Can I use your kitchen? And sorry about scaring Lucy, Sarah said, feeling bad. Why is someone as nice as her with a guy like that? I care for Sarah like a sister. I'll take care of it, Sarah. You relax, I said, but she still helped with cooking while managing the kids. The step-grandparents were quiet, almost like dolls, not saying much. But they said, "Nice home, right, James?" "Yeah, sorry for the noise," James replied, even though the loud ones were the in-laws. The step-grandparents were the sensible ones in that house. So the odd ones were the in-laws, Charles, and probably my husband Richard too. After that, the in-laws and Charles started coming over almost every weekend. They partied loudly till dawn, and we got complaints from neighbors and even the police. Once Sarah, the step-grandparents, and the kids hadn't visited since the housewarming, but the in-laws put me to work without hesitation. I was really stressed out. Richard also started showing his true colors. Once, when I had a cold and asked him to pick up dinner, he came back with hamburgers. "I can't eat this right now," I said, feeling weak. Instead of getting mad, Richard said, "You need to eat to get better, Mary." What if I had the energy to eat that? I wouldn't have asked for help, I thought to myself. Once, when Richard was sick, I sarcastically asked if he wanted a hamburger. He got upset and said, "No, that's ridiculous." In short, this family was selfish and lacked empathy. They were in for a wake-up call. Enjoy your freedom while you can. You'll get what you deserve, I thought with a wicked smirk. A few days later, I had a business trip planned. "I'm off," I said happily to Richard on the morning of my departure. "Is your trip today?" "Sarah's also away on business," Richard said. "Really? I didn't know." "What a coincidence," I replied. "Mom said they'd be in trouble without someone to take care of the house." Richard laughed mockingly, making me think he was being mean. I was busy during my trip. Days went by quickly, and before I knew it, a lot of time had passed. A big typhoon hit, and I contacted Richard. "We're okay, but the family home had some serious leaks," he said. I understood, thinking about their old house. The day I came back home arrived. As I walked from the bus stop, I heard loud laughter in the neighborhood. "Is someone having a barbecue? It's so loud. The neighbors will complain." "Wait, what?" I was shocked. The noise was definitely coming from my house. As I cautiously opened the door, I found bags in the entrance and graffiti on the walls. I was stunned. "Hey, Mary, welcome back," a drunk Richard said. Frustrated, I went to the living room and found drunk in-laws and Charles while Sarah made food in the kitchen. The step-grandparents were quiet, and the kids were drawing on the walls. There was also a woman I didn't know. Overwhelmed, I tried to stay calm. "What's going on?" I asked Richard. "Didn't I tell you? The family home had leaks, so they're staying here for a while," Richard said. "Who was away?" "The in-laws," Charles and Richard decided. "Why don't we live here?" Richard proudly suggested. Even with this explanation, I was stunned into silence. "It's okay. We're family. We have extra rooms." "No problem," the in-laws added, smiling. "Don't worry, Mary. The walls got a bit dirty, but it's just kid stuff," Charles said casually. "And who is that woman?" I asked about the woman on the sofa, playing with her phone. "Oh, that's Karen, a friend of me and Sarah," Richard explained. "Yes, that's right," she said with a smile. This girl Karen was kicked out by her parents, and Richard said she could stay. "Thanks in advance," Karen replied, leaving me utterly confused. In our not-so-big living room, there were 9 adults and 2 children. The room was messy, with scribbles on the walls far from the new house look. The family was loud like a dormitory. I couldn't help but lose my temper. "Seriously, 9 people is too many. Are you guys planning to start a baseball team or something?" Then I realized something. "Hey, where's Lucy?" I asked, but no one knew where our cat was. Dad opened the window to smoke, and Thomas said Lucy ran away. Charles looked at him angrily. "What were you thinking?" "I told you to be careful with the windows," I said, nearly in tears. Richard, looking annoyed, said, "It's just a cat. We can get another one. If you're unhappy, we can just get divorced," he said with disdain. "You said divorce?" I asked. "Yes, I did. I might not if you apologize," Richard said confidently. "Oh, really? Well, then, here, write this," I said, slamming down the divorce papers I had prepared. My section was already filled out. I got my bags from my room. Why haven't you written it yet? I'm busy, I said coolly to Richard. They were shocked. Angrily, Patricia said, Richard, divorce her already. We've built the house, so she's useless now. Realizing too late. Richard said, you'll regret it. But I had no regrets. You're the one who'll struggle. Just write the papers, I said, taking them and giving some to Charles. He laughed. When did I marry you? Looking at the filled wife's section, Charles said, Hey, Sarah. This is Sarah, coldly. I'm divorcing you right now, Sarah said firmly. Charles exclaimed, Sarah bites the hand that feeds you, huh, Joseph? He was talking nonsense. From my perspective, Sarah had been treated like a servant in her in-laws' house. Charles took most of her earnings, leaving little for living expenses. This allowed Charles to do whatever he wanted, and the woman in front of me was Charles's mistress. Mary, I think my husband is cheating. Sarah had confided in me before we planned our divorces. Sarah endured it for her children, but Charles started selling their belongings. She reached her limit. Sarah told me everything. Furious, we started planning our divorces. Sarah gathered evidence of the affair. Her recent business trip was a lie. We looked for a new place to live halfway. Like me, Sarah had no family to turn to, but a friend offered her a job in another state. It was a good opportunity, and our preparations went smoothly. All that was left was presenting the divorce papers. I want to get out of that hellish house, Sarah said, determined. She had a strong core but had been manipulated by her in-laws. Thinking it would be suspicious to return together, Sarah went back first. She soon contacted me, informing me about the takeover at my house and Charles's mistress moving in. All our actions until then were a performance. Knowing what was happening, I told Sarah, we're not living there anymore. Let the kids draw on the walls all they want. That's what I told her. Charles, thinking he could openly live with his mistress, happily signed the divorce papers. Let's go, Sarah. James and everyone, it's time to leave. The step-grandparents stood up and followed Sarah and her children to the door. Living with people like you, I had given up on life. But Sarah opened my eyes, James said, glaring at the family, and left with his great-grandchildren. The in-laws had been taking money from the step-grandparents' pensions. They were truly awful. Well then, take care, we said as we left. You'll regret this, the family laughed, but we ignored them. Months later, Richard contacted me. Oh, I forgot to block him. I could guess the content of the call, so I answered, Mary, come back. Richard sounded desperate. I barely contained my laughter. Come back, we're strangers now, I replied calmly. Let me talk, Mary. What do you mean? Why aren't you paying the mortgage? Patricia's voice came through, probably snatching the phone from Richard. What are you talking about? I have no idea. I played dumb while Patricia sounded frustrated. Apparently, the mortgage for the house had fallen behind last month. When I pressed Richard, he claimed I hadn't been paying it. What an inconvenience. While I remained silent, Patricia kept talking like a machine gun. First of all, this house, you guys had a combined income of $755,000, right? We could have built a better house. We built this as a new home, but it's not what we expected. Originally, they had planned to take over the house. Sarah had informed me of their discussions. Yes, that's true. But with Richard's $30,000 salary, the bank wouldn't lend us more. If we had taken a joint mortgage, maybe we could have gotten a better house. Hearing this, Richard, you lied. I could hear Richard and Patricia arguing on the phone. I ignored them, ended the call, and finally blocked his number. Richard had a pretentious personality. He always wanted to impress others, especially outside his family. When he suggested building the house, I already had divorce in mind. I told him a friend's husband got a mortgage on his own. How cool is that? I heard these stories like a spell. Richard, wanting to show off, opted for a solo mortgage. I had to hold back my laughter. He probably didn't tell his family because he was afraid of them knowing the truth. But I didn't care. The house was built to Richard's taste. I had no attachment to it anymore. Richard hadn't cheated, but there were no alimony penalties in our divorce. So despite him, I left him with the mortgage debt as my revenge. Let him suffer, and I was able to rescue Sarah, whom I cared for like a sister, from that house. That was my main goal. Later, they couldn't pay the mortgage, and the new house was repossessed. But it was a mess inside, with scribbles everywhere and walls yellowed by cigarette smoke from Charles and his mistress. It didn't look like a recently built house. Richard had to rent a cheap apartment, and Joseph and Patricia ended up moving in with him. They'll probably never leave him alone like parasites. I don't care. They're strangers to me now. The only good thing about my former in-laws was that the children weren't affected. Otherwise, they were the worst. Sarah, as Charles' ex-wife, successfully claimed alimony through a lawyer. She had to borrow money but managed to pay it off. I'm glad for her. Charles and his mistress became outcasts in their community and are now missing. They haven't repaid their debts, confirming how awful they are. Sarah is happily working at her friend's place. Her kids are doing well too. I hope they find happiness this time. James and Barbara seem brighter now, like a weight has been lifted. They sold the old family home and are enjoying their retirement in a distant place with their savings. That's great news. As for me, I've requested a transfer to a local office. I was reunited with Lucy, my cat, thanks to social media. Someone in the neighborhood had found and taken care of her. It's good she's friendly now. I live alone in my late father's house with my brother's approval. I'm saving to build my dream house, and someday I hope to introduce someone special at my father's grave. Today, I'm working hard towards that goal.
The gleaming offices of Harrison and Maxwell Law stood 40 stories above Manhattan, where even the junior associates' offices were bigger than my apartment. But I wasn't in one of those offices. Instead, I sat at my paralegal desk, surrounded by towers of case files and the constant hum of fluorescent lights. Still here, little sis? The familiar mocking voice made me grip my pen tighter. Burning the midnight oil with all that filing? Michael stood in my cubicle entrance, his custom-tailored suit probably worth 3 months of my salary. My stepbrother hadn't changed since our parents' marriage 10 years ago. Same smirk, same entitled attitude, just with better clothes now. These depositions need to be processed by morning, I replied without looking up. He laughed, that rich private school laugh that always made my teeth clench. You know, when Mom married your dad, I thought maybe some of our family's ambition would rub off on you. But here you are, still pushing papers. I continued highlighting key passages in the Jensen merger documents, keeping my face neutral. Michael had no idea that every late night, every mundane task, was part of a larger plan. The partner track meeting is tomorrow, he continued, straightening his Hermes tie. Not that you need to worry about that. Some of us were born for greatness. Others. He gestured at my desk. Well, someone needs to do the filing, right? The Jensen merger documents in front of me held secrets he couldn't imagine. Secrets I discovered during those countless hours of just filing. Anyway, he checked his Rolex. Don't stay too late. Those papers won't file themselves. He walked away, his Italian leather shoes clicking against the marble floor. As soon as he was gone, I pulled out my personal notebook. Not the standard legal pad the firm provided, but a small black moleskine filled with 6 months of careful observations. Times, dates, conversations, and most importantly, patterns. My phone buzzed. A text from Judge Harrison, the founding partner's father. Everything ready? All in place, I typed back. The evidence is irrefutable. I'd met Judge Harrison 6 months ago during a charity gala I'd worked extra shifts to attend. While Michael and his fellow associates were getting drunk at the open bar, I'd spent the evening discussing constitutional law with the retired judge. He'd seen something in me that night, something beyond the paralegal label. What followed was a careful dance of mentorship and investigation. The judge had suspicions about certain practices at his son's firm. I had the perfect position to confirm them. Another text arrived. Board meeting moved to tomorrow morning. Be ready. I looked at my reflection in the darkened window. The simple blazer and practical shoes that made me invisible in this world of power suits and designer labels. They never suspected that my endless filing had given me access to every corner of their paper empire. The next morning arrived with the usual chaos of a Manhattan law office. Associates rushed past with coffee cups and briefcases, secretaries juggled calls, and partners strode through it all like kings in their kingdom. Big day, big brother? I asked innocently as Michael rushed past my desk. He paused, adjusting his tie. Partner track nominations. Not that you'd understand, but this is what real lawyers work for. Dad's already lined up the votes. By lunch, I'll be the youngest partner track associate in firm history. If only he knew what those lined-up votes had cost his father, what corners had been cut, what laws had been bent. That's amazing, I said, keeping my voice neutral. I'm sure you earned it. He laughed again. That's your problem, sis. Always thinking everything has to be earned. Sometimes it's about who you are, who you know. Speaking of which, I'd better get to that meeting. These files need to be indexed by 3, okay? I watched him stride toward the conference room, where the firm's leadership was gathering. His father, senior partner Maxwell, stood at the door greeting board members. My phone buzzed one final time. Now. I stood up, smoothing my simple black dress. In my briefcase was 6 months of evidence. Proof of nepotism, hidden accounts, mishandled client funds. A pattern of corruption that went straight to the top. But more importantly, I carried something else. My law degree earned through 6 years of night classes while working full-time. The bar exam results I'd kept hidden. The recommendations from judges and professors who'd seen past the paralegal label. "Excuse me," a firm voice called out. Judge Harrison stood by the conference room door. "We're ready for you." Michael turned from his conversation, confusion crossing his face. "Ready for who?" "Ms. Adams," the judge said, using my real name, not the diminutive little sis I'd endured for years. "I believe she has some matters the board needs to discuss." I walked toward the conference room, feeling Michael's stare. His coffee cup trembled slightly in his hand. "What is this?" he demanded. "She's just a paralegal." Judge Harrison's voice carried across the now silent office. "Is she? Perhaps you should have spent less time mocking her and more time checking the Bar Association's newest member list." The coffee cup slipped from Michael's hand, dark liquid spreading across the marble floor like the stain that was about to spread across his perfect future. I stepped into the conference room facing the gathered board members. It was time to show them exactly who they'd been underestimating all these years. The conference room fell silent as I took my position at the podium. 20 pairs of eyes stared back at me. Managing partners, board members, and Michael, who'd been hastily ushered to a back seat rather than his usual place beside his father. "Ms. Adams," Judge Harrison nodded. "Please proceed." I opened my briefcase, removing a stack of carefully organized folders. Each one represented a thread in the tapestry of corruption I'd uncovered. But first, I needed to establish my credibility. "Before we begin," I said, my voice steady, "I should introduce myself properly. Not as a paralegal, but as a summa cum laude graduate of Columbia Law School, ranked 3rd in my class, and as of last month, a member of the New York State Bar." Maxwell's face reddened. "This is ridiculous. A paralegal can't just dash." "I have copies of my credentials," I continued, sliding documents to the board members, along with letters of recommendation from 3 Supreme Court justices I clerked for during my night school years. "But that's not why we're here." I clicked to the first slide of my presentation. "We're here because while I was just filing papers, I discovered something disturbing about Harrison and Maxwell's partner track program." The next hour was a methodical unveiling of everything I'd documented over the past 6 months. Fabricated performance reviews. Manipulated client billings. Hidden nepotism in promotion decisions. Misappropriated firm resources. With each revelation, I watched the color drain from Maxwell's face. Michael had slumped in his chair, his earlier confidence shattered. "This is outrageous," Maxwell finally exploded. "You were going through confidential firm documents documents I had full authorization to access as part of my paralegal duties," I corrected. "Every single piece of evidence here was obtained legally and ethically." Judge Harrison can confirm that. The retired judge nodded. "I've reviewed everything. It's all admissible and damning." I moved to the next slide. But this isn't just about exposing problems. I've prepared a comprehensive reform proposal for the firm's leadership structure and promotion practices. The proposal I'd spent months crafting appeared on screen. Merit-based promotion criteria. Blind review processes. External oversight committees. Enhanced ethical compliance measures. The firm's reputation is at stake, I continued. But there's a path forward. One that preserves Harrison and Maxwell's legacy while ensuring its future integrity. A senior partner leaned forward. "And what exactly are you proposing for yourself in this new structure?" I met his gaze steadily. "I'm not asking for anything. My role will be determined by the same merit-based criteria I'm proposing for everyone else. No special treatment, no shortcuts." "Unlike some people," someone muttered with a pointed look at Michael. Maxwell stood up, his face purple. "This is a coup. She's trying to destroy everything we've built. "No, James," Judge Harrison interrupted. She's trying to save it. The question is, are we wise enough to let her? I clicked to my final slide. The American Bar Association is already investigating 3 other top firms for similar practices. We can either lead the change or be forced into it. The choice is yours. The room erupted in heated discussions. I stood quietly watching years of entrenched power dynamics begin to crack. A senior partner raised his hand for silence. Ms. Adams, could you walk us through the implementation timeline for these reforms? Of course, I said, pulling out another folder. I've prepared a detailed transition plan. For the next 2 hours I answered questions, explained processes, and demonstrated exactly why I'd spent those years studying law while everyone thought I was just pushing papers. Finally, Judge Harrison called for a vote. All in favor of adopting Ms. Adams' reform proposal? Hands rose across the room. Even Maxwell, seeing the inevitability of change, raised his reluctantly. And regarding Ms. Adams' position within the firm? The managing partner cleared his throat. Given her legal qualifications, demonstrated investigative abilities, and clear commitment to ethical practice, I moved to offer her a position as senior associate, with fast-track consideration for junior partner. More hands raised. Michael stared at his shoes. One condition, I said, causing everyone to pause. The reforms are non-negotiable. Any attempt to water them down or circumvent them, and every document I've shown you today goes to the Bar Association. Judge Harrison smiled. I don't think that will be necessary. Will it, James? Maxwell shook his head, defeated. As the meeting adjourned, partners approached to introduce themselves, no longer as a paralegal but as a colleague. Their earlier condescension had been replaced by careful respect. Michael tried to slip out, but I caught him at the door. You were right about one thing, I said quietly. Some of us were born for greatness. But others? We earn it. Back at my desk, I began packing up my paralegal supplies. A message appeared on my phone. An all-firm email announcing the new ethics reforms and my appointment as senior associate. Judge Harrison appeared beside me. You know they'll make your life difficult at first. Old power structures don't change easily. I smiled, picking up a family photo from my desk, me at my law school graduation, taken in secret last year. They've been underestimating me for 10 years. I'm used to it. And your stepbrother? Michael needs to learn the same lesson I did. Real respect isn't inherited, it's earned. As if on cue, Michael's father stormed past, barking into his phone about damage control. Behind him, Michael walked slowly, his earlier swagger replaced by uncertainty. I turned back to my packing, knowing tomorrow would bring new challenges. But for now, I savored the moment, remembering all those nights of studying after long days of filing, all the mockery I'd endured while quietly building my case. They'd thought I was just a paralegal pushing papers. They never bothered to ask why someone would choose that position in a top law firm while attending Columbia Law at night. They never wondered what I might be learning as I filed those confidential documents. Now they knew. The next morning, I arrived at Harrison and Maxwell to find my name being etched onto a corner office door. My new title gleamed in gold letters: Alexandra Adams, Senior Associate. Your Bar Association profile has been trending since last night, my former cubicle neighbor Sarah said as she helped me move my things. Youngest senior associate appointment in the firm's history. The office buzzed with whispers and stares. Associates who'd never given me a second glance now hovered near my door, trying to curry favor. Partners who'd barely remembered my name suddenly recalled mentoring moments that never happened. Ms. Adams. A timid voice interrupted. It was Jessica, the new paralegal assigned to replace me. Mr. Maxwell. Michael, he's been asking when you'll take your first case assignment. I smiled, remembering all the times Michael had dumped last-minute work on my desk. Tell him I'll be handling the Preston merger. Jessica's eyes widened. But, that's his case. He's been leading it for months. And now he'll be second chair. He can bring the files to my office in an hour. As Jessica scurried away, Judge Harrison appeared in my doorway. Making waves already, I see. The Preston merger has serious ethical issues, I replied, unpacking my law books, no longer hidden in my apartment but proudly displayed. Issues that Michael has been conveniently overlooking. Your stepmother is apparently furious. She's been calling the other board members all morning. I placed my law degree on the wall, finally public after years of secrecy. She always thought her son was entitled to everything. That's part of the problem we're fixing. The next hour brought a parade of introductions. Associates who wanted to collaborate, partners offering mentorship, and clerks suddenly remembering my coffee preference. Each interaction was a small reminder of how quickly power dynamics could shift. At exactly 10 a.m., Michael appeared carrying the Preston merger files. Gone was the designer swagger, replaced by barely concealed resentment. "You can't just take over this case," he started. "I've been working overlooking regulatory violations, ignoring disclosure requirements, and pushing through approvals without proper due diligence," I finished. "Sit down, Michael. It's time for your first real law lesson." For the next 2 hours, I walked him through every mistake, every shortcut, every ethical breach I'd spotted while just filing his paperwork over the past months. "How did you?" he stammered. "When did you learn law?" "While you were networking at cocktail parties, I was studying. While you were playing golf with clients, I was clerking for judges. While you were bragging about your future partnership, I was actually earning one." His face flushed. "Dad won't let you Your father doesn't have the power he used to," I cut in. "And neither do you. From now on, you'll earn your place here just like everyone else." The afternoon brought my first partner meeting. I sat at the conference table, no longer serving coffee but presenting case strategies. Maxwell Sr. watched with barely concealed fury as his colleagues approved my recommendations over his objections. By evening, news of the firm's ethical reforms had reached our competitors. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from other firms' associates, journalists seeking comments, and law school classmates who'd finally learned why I'd kept such a low profile. "Your father's here," Sarah announced. I looked up to see Dad standing in my office doorway, tears in his eyes. "You did it, kid," he said softly. "All those years of studying in secret, all those nights I worried about you working so hard. You knew exactly what you were doing." I hugged him, remembering all the times he'd defended me at family dinners when my stepmother and Michael mocked my lack of ambition. "Ms. Adams." Jessica appeared again. "The managing partners would like to see you. They're reviewing the Burton case and there are some irregularities." I grabbed my briefcase. "More corruption to clean up, more changes to implement. Tell them I'll be right there." "Alexandra," Dad called as I left. "Your mother would have been so proud." The next few weeks transformed Harrison and Maxwell. My ethics reforms exposed decades of questionable practices. Some partners resigned rather than adapt. Others embraced the changes, recognizing the shifting legal landscape. Michael struggled to adjust. Without his father's protection, his work showed its true quality. But slowly, reluctantly, he began to learn real law, real ethics, real responsibility. 1 month after my appointment, I sat in my office reviewing case files. A knock at the door revealed my stepmother. "I suppose you're enjoying this," she said bitterly. "Humiliating my son, destroying my husband's legacy." "Actually," I replied, "I'm saving the firm's legacy. The real one, based on legal excellence, not favoritism. Michael's welcome to be part of that, if he's willing to earn it. You've always been jealous of our family's success. "No," I interrupted. "I've always believed in real success. The kind that comes from work, not privilege. Maybe it's time you learned the difference." As she stormed out, I noticed Michael lingering in the hallway. He'd heard everything. Later that evening, as I prepared to leave, a document appeared on my desk. Michael's first properly researched legal brief. No shortcuts, no oversights, just solid work. At the bottom, he'd written a note. "I never knew what real law looked like. Could you review this?" I picked up my red pen, ready to teach rather than expose. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destruction. It's education. 6 months later, Harrison and Maxwell had transformed. Our ethical reforms became an industry standard. Other firms scrambled to adopt similar measures. The legal press called it a revolution in corporate law culture. Michael eventually earned his place as a competent associate. Not through his father's influence, but through genuine effort. Our relationship would never be warm, but it had evolved into something built on reluctant respect. As for me, I kept the simple blazers but moved to a better apartment. My office wall now held not just my law degree, but articles about our reforms, awards for ethical leadership, and a photo of my mother, a public defender who taught me that justice requires both patience and persistence. The firm's holiday party that year was different. No power plays, no whispered deals, just colleagues celebrating real achievements. I watched from the corner, remembering all those years of silent preparation, of being underestimated and overlooked. Quite a change, Judge Harrison said, joining me. You didn't just earn your place, you changed what that place means. I smiled, thinking of all the young lawyers who could now advance based on merit, not connections. Sometimes the best victories aren't just personal. As I looked around the room, at Michael actually doing his own research, at partners mentoring based on talent rather than privilege, at young associates knowing they had a fair chance, I realized that success wasn't just about proving them wrong. It was about making things right. The gravy boat clinked against the ceramic plate as my Uncle Mark leaned across the Thanksgiving table, his face twisted in that familiar smirk. "Hey everyone," he announced loudly, interrupting the quiet dinner chatter. "Our delivery boy finally made it." I smiled politely, hanging my worn leather jacket on the back of my chair. 15 years of this and he still thought he was clever. The rest of the family shifted uncomfortably, some looking down at their plates, others forcing awkward laughs. "Actually, it's logistics management now," I said quietly, taking my seat at the far end of the table, where I was always placed, the service entrance as my cousins used to joke. "My name is Daniel Foster. I'm 35 years old and for the past decade and a half, my family has thought I was nothing more than a delivery driver who couldn't find a real career. What they didn't know was that I owned Quantum Logistics, one of the largest supply chain management companies in North America, with operations in 43 countries and an annual revenue that would make my uncle's salary look like pocket change. But they weren't ready for that truth. Not yet. Logistics management? Mark snorted, cutting into his turkey. Is that what they call driving a truck these days? How many packages did you deliver today, Danny boy? I took a sip of water, remembering the morning's board meeting where we'd finalized the acquisition of our biggest competitor for $2.3 billion. Just one, Uncle Mark. But it was an important one. My Aunt Patricia patted my hand with fake sympathy. "You know, I could talk to someone at Mark's company. They're always hiring for entry-level positions. You're not getting any younger, dear." Mark worked as a regional manager at Global Tech Industries, one of the largest technology manufacturers in the country. He never let anyone forget it, especially me. What he didn't know was that Global Tech had been desperately trying to secure a meeting with Quantum Sumi for the past 3 months. Their supply chain was bleeding money and they needed us to fix it. "I appreciate the offer," I said, helping myself to mashed potatoes. "But I'm happy where I am." The only person who'd ever known the truth was my grandmother Rose. She'd believed in me when I started Quantum from my garage at 20, using the inheritance she'd left me against everyone's advice. "Build something that matters," she'd said before she passed. "And let your success speak louder than their doubts." I'd followed her advice to the letter. The doorbell rang, interrupting what was surely about to be another lecture about my life choices. My cousin Emma jumped up to answer it, probably grateful for the escape. "Is this the Foster residence?" a deep voice asked from the foyer. "I'm looking for Mr. Foster." "It's urgent." Mark stood up, straightening his jacket. "I'm Mr. Foster," he said importantly. "No," the voice replied. "I'm looking for Daniel Foster." The room went quiet as James Chin, CEO of Global Tech Industries, Mark's boss's boss, stepped into our dining room. I stood slowly, wiping my mouth with a napkin. "Good evening, Mr. Chin." He looked relieved. "Mr. Foster, thank God. I've been trying to reach you. The Singapore merger is happening faster than expected. We need Quantum's infrastructure immediately." Mark's fork clattered against his plate. "Sir," he squeaked. "You know Daniel?" Chin looked confused. "Of course I know Daniel Foster. Everyone in the industry knows the founder of Quantum Logistics." He turned back to me. "Please, sir, can we discuss the contract? Our board is waiting." The turkey wasn't the only thing that got roasted that Thanksgiving. Monday morning arrived with the weight of 15 years of silence. I stood in my corner office on the 50th floor of Quantum Tower, adjusting my Brioni suit, a far cry from the delivery uniform my family thought I wore daily. The morning headlines flashed across my screens. Quantum Logistics to acquire Global Tech's supply chain in $4.8 billion deal. Tech giant bows to delivery king. Industry's biggest merger. Daniel Foster, the silent billionaire revolutionizing global logistics. My phone had been exploding since the press release. Mom, Daniel, please call me. The news. I don't understand. Mark, Danny, about today's meeting. We're family. Let's talk first. Various cousins. Hey cuz. Remember when we used to play as kids? Sarah entered, stunning in her executive attire. Your uncle's here. He's been in the lobby for 2 hours. How's he looking? Like a man who just realized he's been mocking his boss for 15 years. She handed me a tablet. The audit results are worse than we thought. His division has been hemorrhaging money for years. The creative accounting wasn't just inefficiency, it was deliberate. I scrolled through the numbers, feeling a heaviness in my chest. He falsified delivery data to hide system failures. 300 families lost their jobs because of his cover-up. The board's waiting. Chin looks ready for blood. I nodded, straightening my tie. Send Mark up. 5 minutes later, my uncle entered. Gone was the arrogant smirk, replaced by something between terror and desperate hope. He'd clearly rushed out to buy a new suit. The price tag was still visible on the sleeve. Danny, he started, then corrected himself. Mr. Foster. If I could explain. Sit. He sat. Do you remember Grandma Rose's funeral? I asked quietly. He blinked at the unexpected question. What? When I tried to tell your children about their grandmother's investment in quantum, you said I was making up stories to seem important. I didn't know. You told everyone I was disrespecting her memory. I turned my screen around, showing him the trust account. She invested $50,000, her entire savings. That investment is now worth $40 million. Your children's inheritance, which you mocked as delivery boy fantasies. Mark's face went ash gray. Daniel, please. That's not why you're here. I pulled up the audit results. Explain this. As he looked at the numbers, whatever remaining color in his face drained away. I can fix this, he whispered. Just give me time. 300 people lost their jobs, Mark. Families lost their homes. All while you bragged at Thanksgiving dinners about your corporate success. I had to maintain appearances, he burst out. Everyone expected me to be successful. You don't understand the pressure. The pressure of pretending? I stood up. No, I wouldn't understand that. I was too busy actually succeeding. The intercom buzzed. Mr. Foster, the board is ready. We're done here. I gathered my papers. HR has your separation package. Your division is being restructured under new management. You're firing me? Your own uncle? I paused at the door. No, Mark. Your actions fired you. I'm just making it official. The boardroom fell silent as I entered. 20 of the most powerful executives in the industry, all eyes on me. Chin nodded from his seat. Before we begin, I said, taking my place at the head of the table, I want to discuss the human cost of corporate deception. I stood before the board, my uncle's audit results displayed on the massive screen behind me. The room was silent except for the soft hum of air conditioning and the occasional sharp intake of breath as executives processed the numbers. 300 families, I continued, my voice carrying across the polished mahogany table. 300 families lost their income because one manager chose to hide system failures instead of addressing them. Chen's face was thunderous. This is beyond inefficiency. This is criminal negligence. The Western Division's actual performance, I clicked to the next slide, has been masked by creative accounting for years. The $300 million loss from the tech contract last year? It wasn't market conditions. It was systemic failure, deliberately hidden. The CFO of Global Tech raised her hand. Mr. Foster, these numbers, if they're accurate. They're accurate. Sarah stepped forward, distributing detailed reports. We've tracked every falsified entry, every manipulated metric. The pattern goes back 7 years. Another executive spoke up. This is the division managed by your uncle, correct? Yes, I replied simply. Which is why I recused myself from the initial investigation. The findings were independently verified by 3 separate audit firms. The room erupted in murmurs. Family connections were one thing, but this level of corporate misconduct was another. There's more, Sarah announced, clicking to the next slide. The cover-up affected more than just global tech. Because of the division's central position in the supply chain, the ripple effects impacted dozens of smaller companies. We've identified at least 7 local businesses that went bankrupt due to the deliberately mismanaged distribution. I thought about those small business owners. People like I used to be, building something from nothing, only to have it destroyed because my uncle was too proud to admit his failures. "What's your recommendation, Mr. Foster?" Chin asked, though his tone suggested he already knew. "Complete restructuring of the Western Division. Criminal investigation into the falsified records. And..." I paused. "A compensation fund for affected families. That could cost millions," someone protested. "I'll personally fund it," I stated. "Consider it a family obligation." The meeting continued for hours. By the time we emerged, the merger agreement was signed, the restructuring plan approved, and my uncle's career was effectively over. Outside the boardroom, Sarah squeezed my hand. "You okay?" Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. A message from my mother. "Daniel, I'm at your office. Please. We need to talk." I looked at Sarah. "Did you know she was here?" "Security called up. She's been waiting since the meeting started. Along with Kate and..." Sarah checked her tablet. "Apparently half the extended family." I loosened my tie slightly. "Of course they are. Want me to get rid of them?" I thought about all the family gatherings where they'd dismissed me. All the times they'd made me feel small. But I also thought about Grandma Rose's words. Success without compassion is just another form of failure. No, I decided. It's time to clear the air. All of it. The elevator ride down to the lobby felt longer than usual. When the doors opened, I saw them. My mother, sister, and various relatives, all looking out of place among the marble columns and modern art of Quantum's headquarters. My mother stepped forward first, her eyes red from crying. "Daniel, the news, all these years. Perhaps we should talk somewhere private," I suggested, noting the curious glances from employees passing by. "Your uncle," Kate blurted out. "Is it true? What they're saying about the audit? You'll read about it in tomorrow's papers." I gestured toward the private elevator. "Shall we?" As we rode up to my office, I could feel their eyes taking in everything. My custom suit, the respectful nods from executives we passed, the sheer scale of what I'd built while they thought I was just delivering packages. The view from my office made them gasp. Chicago stretched out below us, a sea of buildings and streets where Quantum's trucks moved like blood through veins. "All this time," my mother whispered, when you thought I was failing?" I finished. "When you skipped my Harvard graduation because delivery school wasn't worth celebrating." She flinched. "We didn't know. You never asked." I sat behind my desk, the same desk where hours earlier I'd ended my uncle's career. "For 15 years, you never once asked what I was actually doing. You just assumed." "Your grandmother," my mother said suddenly, her voice trembling. "She knew, didn't she? That's why she left you the inheritance. Why she always defended you." I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a worn envelope, Grandma Rose's last letter to me, delivered after her death. I'd never shown it to anyone except Sarah. "She did more than know," I said, unfolding the letter. "She was my first investor. The only person who believed this wasn't just a delivery boy's fantasy." Kate stepped forward. "Daniel, about all those times Don't," I interrupted. "This isn't about apologies. It's about truth. All of it." I pressed a button on my desk and the wall-mounted screens came to life, displaying Quantum's global operations. Red dots pulsed across digital maps, showing real-time deliveries, transactions, and data flows. "Every 3 seconds, I explained, our systems process more money than Mark made in a year. Every minute, we move more packages than I delivered in my entire time as an actual delivery driver. And every hour, we generate more revenue than our entire family's combined net worth." My mother sank into a chair. "But why didn't you tell us? Would you have believed me?" I stood, walking to the window. "When I tried to explain my software ideas, you said I was wasting time. When I worked through holidays to build this company, you said I was avoiding real work. When I made my first million, Mark told everyone I was lying about having a pretend company." "We were wrong," Kate whispered. "Yes, you were. I turned back to face them. But that's not why I stayed quiet. I kept silent because Grandma Rose taught me something valuable. True success doesn't need announcements. It speaks for itself. My phone buzzed, a message from Sarah. Board approved the compensation fund. Press conference in an hour. I have a press conference soon, I told my family. We're announcing a fund to help the families hurt by Mark's actions. How bad is it? Kate asked. What Mark did. I pulled up the audit summary. As they read through it, their expressions shifted from confusion to horror. 300 families, my mother breathed. All those people lost everything because Mark was too proud to admit he was failing. I closed the file. Pride seems to run in our family. What happens now? Kate asked. Now. I checked my watch. Now I have to go tell the world that while one foster destroyed families to maintain appearances, another foster will make it right. I paused. And then maybe we can talk about what family really means. And Mark. Mark made his choices. Just like I made mine 15 years ago when everyone told me I was throwing my life away on a delivery job. As if on cue, my office door opened and Sarah entered, tablet in hand. Daniel, they're ready for us downstairs. The compensation fund announcement. My family stared at her, finally recognizing my dispatcher fiancée for who she really was, Quantum CFO and one of the most powerful women in corporate America. Give me a minute, I told her. Sarah nodded, then addressed my family with a slight smile. You should watch the press conference. Might help you understand what your delivery boy has been up to all these years. After she left, my mother stood shakily. Daniel, I know we can't undo the past, but... No, I agreed, we can't. But we can learn from it. I gestured to the door. Shall we? I have some families to help rebuild what our family helped destroy. As we rode down to the press conference, I thought about Grandma Rose's words in her final letter. Success isn't about proving others wrong, Daniel. It's about proving yourself right. Looking at my family's shell-shocked faces, I realized they were finally beginning to understand that. The press conference footage played on every major network that evening. My face, once ignored at family gatherings, now filled screens across the nation as I announced the $100 million compensation fund for families affected by the global tech scandal. Success comes with responsibility, I told the cameras. When corporate misconduct hurts families, we have an obligation to make it right. No one missed the irony. The delivery boy was now saving families destroyed by his successful uncle's deception. 2 weeks later, I sat in my penthouse, reviewing the latest compensation claims when my doorman announced an unexpected visitor. My mother. She entered cautiously, clutching a familiar wooden box. I found this in the attic, she said softly. It's from your grandmother. The box was dusty but intact. Inside, I found stacks of papers. My original business plans, early quantum algorithms scribbled on napkins, and dozens of letters between Grandma Rose and various investors. She kept everything, my mother whispered. Every idea you shared, every plan you made. She believed in you when none of you did. I pulled out a yellowed envelope marked for Daniel's family, open when they finally see. Inside was a letter dated just days before her death. To my beloved but blind family. If you're reading this, you've finally discovered what I've known all along, that success doesn't always wear a suit and tie, and true vision doesn't need validation. Daniel came to me 15 years ago with more than a dream. He had a revolution in his hands, written in code and logistics algorithms that would change the world. While you mocked his delivery job, he was studying supply chain patterns. While you dismissed his computer games, he was building the future. I invested not just my savings but my faith in him. Today that investment has grown beyond money. It grew into proof that sometimes the greatest success stories are written in silence. To my children and grandchildren, your brother, your uncle, your cousin whom you dismissed? He wasn't delivering packages. He was building an empire. And he did it not to prove you wrong but to prove himself right. Learn from this. Success isn't measured by who shouts the loudest, but by who works the smartest. With love and hope for understanding, Rose. My mother's hands trembled as she finished reading. There's more, she said, pulling out a stack of stock certificates. She left shares for everyone in the family. We never knew. Because no one checked, I finished. The same way no one checked what I was really building all these years. Sarah joined us carrying more files. The compensation fund is fully operational. We've already helped 50 families restart their businesses. My mother looked at Sarah with new eyes, finally seeing her as more than just a dispatcher. You too? You built all this together? Sarah was my first hire, I explained. Harvard Business School graduate who believed in the crazy idea that a delivery driver could revolutionize global logistics. She saw what our family couldn't or wouldn't see. The wedding, my mother started hesitantly. Will you still? Yes, Sarah answered. But not at the country club Mark suggested. We're having it at the community center we built for the families affected by the scandal. Success isn't just about making money, it's about making a difference. Just then my phone buzzed. A message from one of the families we'd helped. Their small business was reopening tomorrow, stronger than before. That's what real success looks like, I told my mother, showing her the message. Not the fancy cars or office towers. It's about building something that matters. As if to punctuate my point, a quantum truck passed by the window below, carrying not just packages but possibilities. Just like I used to do before I built an empire that proved success doesn't need announcements. It just needs belief. Your grandmother, my mother said quietly, she would be so proud. No, I corrected gently. She was already proud. She just waited for everyone else to catch up. And in that moment, surrounded by the proof of 15 years of silent success, I realized Grandma Rose had been right all along. True achievement doesn't need validation from others. It simply needs the courage to believe in yourself when no one else will. My name is Dr. Marcus Chin, and 3 months ago I thought I understood my family. I'm 34, a cardiothoracic surgeon at St. Mary's Hospital in Chicago, and until my father set fire to my medical diploma while screaming about wasted potential, I believed that success was something to be celebrated, not redistributed. The night that burning piece of paper curled into ash in their living room fireplace, I realized they'd never seen me at all. They'd only seen what they wanted me to be. Growing up, I learned early that being good wasn't enough. You had to be the right kind of successful. Sarah, 3 years younger, had always been the golden child. Where I was methodical and quiet, she was charismatic and ambitious. Where I spent high school volunteering at free clinics, she built the perfect college application with debate victories and student government positions. Marcus will be a doctor, Mom would tell relatives. But Sarah will be a surgeon. She has the personality for it. Even then, I knew something was wrong with that logic. Surgery wasn't about personality. It was about precision and the ability to make life or death decisions under pressure. But my parents had already decided who fit their vision of medical excellence. I got into Northwestern for pre-med. Sarah got into Harvard. The celebration was telling. Champagne for Sarah's acceptance, a handshake for mine. When I graduated summa cum laude and Sarah graduated with honors, they framed her diploma first. Medical school continued the pattern. I went to University of Chicago, throwing myself into every rotation, spending nights mastering surgical techniques. Sarah went to Johns Hopkins and made the social scene as important as her studies. Her Instagram posts from networking events got more family comments than my research publications. Networking is part of medicine, Mom explained. She understands the business side better than you do. The business side. As if saving lives was about cocktail conversations rather than steady hands and years of training. But I kept my head down, finished my residency in record time, and landed a position at one of Chicago's most prestigious hospitals. Sarah finished family medicine and immediately started talking about opening her own practice. That's when the requests began. Marcus, Dad said during a family dinner, Sarah's been thinking about specializing in cardiology. Maybe you could help her get into your program. I explained that cardiothoracic surgery required years of additional training. Sarah would need to complete an entirely different residency track. Dad waved this away like I was being deliberately difficult. You have connections now. Surely someone owes you a favor. Every family gathering included new suggestions for how I could help Sarah's career. Eventually, the requests became more direct. Your practice is doing well, Mom observed. Sarah could really benefit from an established patient base. We think it would be generous if you brought Sarah in as a partner. Eventually, she could take over. Take over. As if my decade of surgical training was just a placeholder until Sarah was ready to step in. I tried to explain that cardiac surgery and family medicine were completely different specializations. Medicine is medicine, Dad said dismissively. She'll learn. Besides, she has better business instincts than you do. The pressure intensified over the summer. They'd show up at the hospital unannounced, expecting tours and introductions. They'd mention my work to friends while emphasizing how Sarah would soon be joining the practice. We're not asking you to give up medicine, Mom explained. We're asking you to share it. Family is supposed to support each other. Support. I'd been supporting them for years, paying for Dad's failed business ventures, covering Sarah's student loans, funding family vacations I was too busy to attend. But when I needed support, their concern was always about how my success could benefit Sarah. The breaking point came 3 months ago. I'd just been offered the position of Chief of Cardiothoracic Surgery at St. Mary's, the youngest doctor in the hospital's history to receive such an appointment. I called my parents immediately, expecting pride. Instead, Dad's first response was, "That's perfect timing. Sarah can come in as your associate." I tried again to explain that Sarah wasn't qualified for cardiac surgery. "You're being selfish," Mom said sharply. "This is exactly the opportunity Sarah needs. You've had your time to play doctor. Now it's her turn. Play doctor." As if the hundreds of patients I'd saved were just an elaborate game until the real doctor could take over. The confrontation that ended everything happened on a Sunday evening. I'd just saved a 45-year-old father's life during a complex bypass procedure. I should have gone home, but I stopped by my parents' house to share the good news. I found them with Sarah, surrounded by legal documents. Partnership agreements, business proposals, transfer papers. They'd been planning my future without me. "Perfect timing," Dad said. "We've been working on the transition plan. Sarah's lawyer drew up everything. You just need to sign." I picked up the papers, scanning the legal language. A complete transfer of my practice, my patient list, my hospital partnerships. According to these documents, Sarah would become the primary physician, and I would remain as a junior associate under her supervision. "This is insane," I said. "Sarah can't perform cardiac surgery. She's never even assisted on a heart procedure." "She'll learn," Mom said dismissively. "You can teach her. Eventually she won't need you at all. Eventually she won't need you at all." The casual cruelty hit me like a physical blow. "I won't sign this," I said quietly. Dad's face flushed red with rage. He stood up so fast his chair tipped backward. "Ungrateful," he spat. "After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us? What exactly have you done for me?" I asked, surprising myself with how calm I sounded. "We raised you. We supported your education. We believed in you when no one else would. Believed in me as a stepping stone to Sarah's success. Believed in me as a means to an end." "I'm not signing," I repeated. That's when Dad exploded. He stormed over to the mantelpiece where my medical school diploma hung and ripped it from the wall, glass cracking as the frame hit the floor. "Medicine is wasted on you," he screamed, pulling a lighter from his pocket. "Sarah needs this more than you." I watched, frozen, as he flicked the lighter and held the flame to my diploma. The paper caught immediately, years of study and sacrifice curling into ash. The embossed seal of the University of Chicago Medical School darkened and disappeared. "There," he said, dropping the burning remains into the fireplace. "Now maybe you'll understand what's important." I stared at the flames, consuming the physical proof of one of my greatest achievements. I should have been devastated. Instead, I felt something unexpected. Relief. "Okay," I said quietly. The simple word seemed to deflate Dad's rage. He'd expected a fight, screaming, maybe violence. Instead, I picked up my keys and headed for the door. "Where are you going?" Sarah called. "We're not done talking about this." I paused at the doorway. "Yes," I said. "We are." I drove home through empty streets, my mind strangely clear. The diploma burning in their fireplace was just paper. The real proof of my medical training was in my hands, my knowledge, my experience. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd assumed I was just an employee at St. Mary's, that my practice was something they could transfer like a business license. They'd never understood the true nature of what I'd built. Monday morning, I walked into the offices of my attorney, Jennifer Hartley, with a folder thick enough to choke a horse. "You're sure about this?" she asked. "Completely sure." Jennifer opened the folder and began laying out documents across her conference table. Contracts, agreements, intellectual property filings, patent applications, licensing deals. The true scope of what I'd built over 8 years. Your parents have no idea, do they? Jennifer asked. None. What my family had never understood was that I wasn't just a surgeon at St. Mary's. I was the co-founder and majority owner of Advanced Cardiac Solutions, a medical technology company that developed innovative surgical instruments and techniques. While they thought I was playing doctor, I'd been revolutionizing cardiac surgery. It started during my residency when I noticed inefficiencies in standard bypass procedures. Working with biomedical engineers, I'd developed a new type of stent that reduced surgery time by 40% and improved patient outcomes significantly. Instead of just publishing research, I'd filed patents and started a company. Over the years, Advanced Cardiac Solutions had grown from a basement startup to a major player in the medical device industry. Our instruments were used in hospitals nationwide. Our techniques were taught in medical schools. Our patents generated millions in licensing fees annually. My practice at St. Mary's was actually a testing ground for new procedures and equipment. The hospital paid substantial licensing fees to use our technology, and I maintained a position on their board of directors. The board meeting is at 10, Jennifer reminded me. At exactly 10 a.m., I stood before the St. Mary's Hospital Board of Directors for our quarterly Advanced Cardiac Solutions report. Ladies and gentlemen, I began, I'm pleased to report that ACIS has exceeded all projections. Our devices are now used in over 400 hospitals nationwide, and our latest innovation is ready for final testing phases. I clicked to the next slide, showing revenue projections that made board members lean forward. The expanded partnership proposal would establish St. Mary's as our primary research facility, bringing an estimated additional $15 million in annual licensing fees. As I continued explaining our revolutionary new device, I heard commotion outside. Through the glass walls, I could see my parents and Sarah in the hallway, arguing with security. Excuse me, I said to the board. I believe there may be some family members trying to reach me. Would it be possible to invite them in? Within minutes, my parents and Sarah were escorted into the boardroom, their confidence wavering as they took in the formal setting, the presentation screen, the dozen hospital executives staring at them. Mom, Dad, Sarah, I said pleasantly. Perfect timing. I was just telling the board about the future of Advanced Cardiac Solutions. Dad stepped forward, trying to regain control. We need to speak with you privately. There's been a misunderstanding about... About what? Dr. Morrison, the chief of staff, interrupted. I'm sorry, but who are you? I'm his father, Dad said. We're here about his medical practice. There's been some confusion about ownership and... The silence that followed was deafening. Several board members exchanged glances. Dr. Chen, Dr. Morrison said carefully, would you like to explain to your family what Advanced Cardiac Solutions is? I looked at my parents, at Sarah's increasingly pale face. Advanced Cardiac Solutions is the medical technology company I founded 8 years ago, I said calmly. We develop innovative cardiac surgical devices. I'm the majority owner, chief medical officer and primary patent holder. St. Mary's licenses our technology and provides research facilities. Sarah's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. But, your practice. I don't have a practice in the traditional sense, I continued. I'm a surgeon, an inventor, and a business owner. The work I do here generates millions in revenue for both the hospital and my company. Mom finally found her voice. Why didn't you tell us? Because you never asked, I said simply. You only cared about what Sarah could take from it. Dr. Morrison decided to help clarify the situation. Dr. Chen, she said formally, for the record, would it be possible for someone else to simply take over your position? I pretended to consider seriously. Well, they would need to complete medical school, a surgical residency, a cardiothoracic fellowship, and several years of specialized training. They would also need to demonstrate proficiency in biomedical engineering, hold multiple patents, and have experience running a multi-million-dollar medical technology company. And how long would that typically take? Conservatively, 15 to 20 years. Assuming they had the aptitude. Sarah made a small choked sound. Dad's face had gone from red to sickly gray. Mom was staring at me like she'd never seen me before. Dr. Chen is irreplaceable, Dr. Morrison replied firmly. His innovations have revolutionized cardiac surgery. His partnership with this hospital has elevated our cardiac program to national prominence. The words hung in the air. Irreplaceable. Revolutionary. Everything my parents had never seen, never acknowledged, never understood. We just thought, family should help family. Dad made one last desperate attempt. Family should help family, I agreed. That's why I've paid for your business ventures, covered Sarah's loans and funded family vacations for 8 years. But when you decided to burn my diploma and demand I hand over my life's work to someone unqualified, you made it clear that you don't see me as family, you see me as a resource to be exploited. Dr. Morrison cleared her throat diplomatically. Perhaps this family discussion should continue privately? Of course, I said. The meeting will conclude in about an hour. You're welcome to wait in the lobby. They filed out in stunned silence, leaving me to finalize the partnership expansion that would cement my position as one of the most successful cardiac surgeons and medical innovators in the country. An hour later, I found them in the lobby like refugees from their own expectations. Sarah was crying quietly. Mom was staring at her hands. Dad was reading something on his phone, probably Googling advanced cardiac solutions. 52 million in annual revenue, he said without looking up. Forbes named you one of the top medical innovators under 40. I sat down across from them. I never told you because you never asked. Every conversation about my career has been about how I could help Sarah. Not once did you express curiosity about my actual work or achievements. Sarah finally spoke. I didn't know. I thought you were just... I didn't realize. You didn't realize because you didn't want to know. It was easier to see me as lucky or simply in your way. Mom reached toward me then pulled her hand back. We're proud of you. We've always been proud. No, I said gently. You've been proud of the idea of me. But you've never been proud of who I actually am. If you had been, you wouldn't have tried to give it all to Sarah. Dad looked at me directly for the first time. What happens now? Now you go home and think about what you really want from your children, I said, standing up. Because if what you want is success and contribution to the world, you already have that. But if what you want is control and the right to redistribute your children's accomplishments, then you'll need to look elsewhere. 3 weeks later, I received a formal letter from Sarah. She was starting over, building her own family practice, working with underserved communities. She apologized for the years of competition for treating my success as her failure. The letter was honest, painful, and probably necessary. My parents never apologized. They occasionally sent updates through extended family, always including subtle suggestions that I should reach out. That family was important. But working things out would require them to acknowledge what they'd tried to take from me. 6 months after my diploma burned in their fireplace, Advanced Cardiac Solutions won the National Medical Innovation Award. As I stood on that stage holding an award representing 8 years of innovation and thousands of lives saved, I thought about the diploma burning in their fireplace. They'd thought they were destroying my credentials, forcing me to choose between my achievements and their approval. Instead, they'd freed me from the need for their validation. They'd shown me the difference between family that supports you and family that consumes you. The award sits on my desk now, next to photos of surgical teams and patients who've returned to full, healthy lives. My parents have never seen it, never asked about it. But that's okay. I don't need them to see it. I know what I've built, what I've achieved, and what I'm capable of creating in the future. Sometimes, the greatest gift your family can give you is showing you exactly who they are so you can decide exactly who you want to be. Medicine wasn't wasted on me. It was fulfilled through me. And no one, not even family, will ever take that away again. It's just sitting there empty most of the year anyway, my sister Amanda declared, waving her perfectly manicured hands around my beach house living room. And it would make the perfect honeymoon spot. I mean, really, Olivia, what better wedding gift could you give your only sister? I sat quietly on my grandmother's old armchair, the one piece of furniture I'd kept when I bought this place 5 years ago. Outside, the waves crashed against the shore, a sound that usually brought me peace. Today, it just reminded me of everything I was about to lose. Or rather, everything they thought they could take. Amanda, honey, Mom chimed in, perched on the edge of my sofa like she was afraid the casual beach decor might somehow taint her designer outfit. You're absolutely right. It would be the perfect start to your new life with Bradley. Bradley, my soon-to-be brother-in-law, who was currently prowling around my house like a real estate agent, probably already planning where to put his tacky modern art pieces. The view is incredible, he mused, pressing his hands against my oceanfront windows. We could host amazing parties here. Really network with the right people. I caught my reflection in those same windows, plain dark hair pulled back, simple linen shirt, bare feet. Nothing like Amanda's perfect blowout and Michelle Obama-worthy dress. I'd always been the family disappointment, the one who chose a boring career in urban development over joining Dad's investment firm. Olivia. Mom's voice took on that familiar edge of disapproval. You haven't said anything. This is your chance to finally contribute something meaningful to the family. Contribute. As if the past 15 years of building my own success meant nothing because I'd done it outside their carefully curated world. The house isn't available, I said quietly. Amanda's perfectly plucked eyebrows shot up. What do you mean not available? You're here like what, 3 weekends a year? The rest of the time it's just wasting space. If they only knew how many nights I'd actually spent here over the past year. How many meetings I'd hosted in the local coffee shop down the street. How many plans I'd drawn up while sitting on my deck, watching the sunset over the water. I have plans for it, I replied. Plans. Mom scoffed. Olivia, be reasonable. Your sister is getting married. This is about family duty. Family duty. The same phrase they'd used when they wanted me to give Amanda my college fund because she needed a semester in Paris. The same words they'd thrown at me when they suggested I sell my first condo and give her the money for a down payment on her dream house. I said no. My voice was firmer now. Amanda's face shifted from entitled confidence to something uglier. This is so typical. You've always been selfish, Olivia. Always putting your little projects above family. Little projects? I couldn't help but laugh. You mean my career? My independence? My success that didn't come from Dad's connections? Now girls, Mom started, but Amanda was on a roll. You think you're so special because you made it on your own? She made air quotes with her French manicured fingers. Newsflash, you got lucky with one decent investment. This house is probably the only valuable thing you own, and you won't even share it with family. I stood up slowly, walking to my office. Behind me, I could hear Mom trying to smooth things over, Bradley making comments about beach house renovations like he already owned the place. When I returned, I carried a thick manila envelope. You're right about one thing, Amanda, I said calmly. This house is valuable. More valuable than you know. I pulled out a stack of papers and laid them on the coffee table. Architectural renderings, development permits, contract agreements. What is all this? Mom asked, picking up one of the drawings. The future, I replied. Not just of this house but of this entire beachfront. The rendering showed a luxury resort complex stretching along the coastline. Modern, elegant, environmentally conscious. Everything I'd spent the past year designing with my development team. I don't understand, Amanda said, but her voice had lost some of its confidence. Let me explain it simply. I picked up the demolition order that sat on top of the pile. In 3 months, this house, along with every other property on this block, will be demolished to make way for the Silver Bay Resort and Residences. A $300 million project that I've been developing for the past year. The silence that followed was deafening. You're tearing it down? Amanda's voice cracked. The whole block, I confirmed. My company bought out every property owner over the past 18 months. The papers were finalized last week. Your company? Mom's voice was barely a whisper. I smiled, pulling out the final document, the one with my name listed as CEO of Coastal Development Partners, the firm behind the entire project. Those little projects you mentioned? I said to Amanda. They paid off. Really well. This resort is just the first of 5 we're building along the coast. Bradley, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly found his voice. Wait, CDP. The company that's revolutionizing luxury coastal properties? That's yours. Every square foot, I confirmed. So you see, Amanda, I can't give you the house for your honeymoon. Because in 3 months it won't exist. None of this will. I gestured to the windows where the sun was setting over the water. But hey, once the resort is built, you're welcome to book a room. I hear the honeymoon suite will have an amazing view. The look on their faces, shock, disbelief, and dawning realization, was better than any wedding gift I could have given. Now, I said, gathering up the papers, I have a meeting with my development team in 20 minutes. So unless you'd like to discuss resort membership packages, I suggest we wrap this up. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just saying no. It's showing them exactly what they tried and failed to take from you. The news of my company's development project spread through the family like wildfire. Within days, my phone was flooded with messages from relatives who'd previously only contacted me for favors or to express disappointment. Darling, let's do lunch. We should catch up. About that resort project. I archived them all, focusing instead on the final phase of property acquisitions. The demolition notices had gone out, and my office was buzzing with activity when Amanda made her next appearance. Miss Bennett. My assistant Jack poked his head in. Your sister's here. Says it's urgent. I looked up from the architectural plans spread across my desk. The corner office of CDP's headquarters offered a stunning view of the city, but right now, all I could see was Amanda's reflection in the glass, standing in my doorway in what appeared to be her most expensive outfit. Olivia, she started, her voice dripping with practiced sweetness. We need to talk. I'm in the middle of something, I replied, not looking up from the plans. It's about the resort. She sat down uninvited, crossing her legs carefully. Bradley and I have been thinking. Dangerous habit, I murmured, still focused on my work. We want to invest. Now that got my attention. I finally looked at her, taking in the desperate gleam in her eyes. Invest. Yes. Bradley's father has connections in real estate. We could bring in additional funding, make it a family project. Her smile was brittle. After all, blood is thicker than water, right? I leaned back in my chair, studying her. Interesting. And this sudden desire to invest. It wouldn't have anything to do with Bradley's development company losing the bid on the North Shore project last month. Her smile faltered. How did you know? I pulled up a file on my computer. Amanda, I make it my business to know everything about potential competitors, including the fact that Bradley's father's company is 3 failed projects away from bankruptcy. That's private information. Not when it's public record. I turned my screen to show her the financial reports. Your future father-in-law has been trying to arrange a meeting with me for weeks. I assume this is his latest attempt. The facade cracked. You don't understand. Bradley's family, they need this. If they don't land a major project soon, then maybe Bradley should have thought about that before trying to claim my beach house as his personal party venue. I stood up, walking to the window. Or before mocking my little career at your engagement party. That was months ago. People change. No, I said quietly. People reveal who they really are. The only thing that's changed is that now you know I'm not the family failure you can push around anymore. A knock at the door interrupted us. Jack appeared with a stack of contracts. The final demolition paperwork needs your signature, Ms. Bennett. Thank you, Jack. I took the papers, then turned back to Amanda. You should go. I have a company to run. But Amanda wasn't done. She stood up, tears threatening to ruin her perfect makeup. Mom was right about you. You're cold. Heartless. This isn't just about Bradley's family. What about the people who live in those beach houses? The families you're displacing. I smiled, sliding a document across my desk. You mean the families we provided luxury relocation packages for? The ones who received above-market value for their properties plus moving expenses? The ones who get first choice of units in the new resort residences. She stared at the paper, which detailed the generous compensation packages my company had provided. Unlike some people, I continued, I don't build my success by stepping on others. Every property owner on that beach agreed to sell because we made it worth their while. We're creating jobs, improving the local economy, and doing it all sustainably. But what about memories? History? That beach house was Grandma's. And Grandma was a businesswoman who understood value, I replied. She's the one who taught me to see potential where others saw only sentiment. To build something bigger than myself. I walked to the door, holding it open. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a meeting with actual investors. People who see me as more than just a convenient resource to exploit. As Amanda walked out, she turned back one last time. The wedding is in 2 months. Right before the demolition. I still hope you'll come. I looked at her steadily. I'll be there. But not for the reasons you think. After she left, I pulled up the demolition schedule on my computer. The date was carefully chosen, one day after Amanda's wedding. One final gift to the sister who never appreciated what family really meant. Because sometimes the best lessons come from watching your past get torn down to make way for your future. Amanda's wedding day arrived with all the pomp and circumstance our family was known for. The country club was decorated within an inch of its life, champagne flowed freely, and everyone who was anyone in our social circle was there to witness the perfect union. I sat quietly in the back during the ceremony, dressed in a simple but elegant navy suit. Not the pastel monstrosity Amanda had originally chosen for her bridesmaids before quietly uninviting me from the wedding party. My laptop was in my car, files ready for tomorrow's demolition kickoff, but for now I watched the spectacle unfold. Isn't it wonderful? Mom whispered to her friend in the row ahead of me. Bradley's father is arranging a surprise announcement at the reception. Something about a major business collaboration. I smiled to myself knowing exactly what that surprise would be. Bradley's father had been dropping hints all month about a supposed partnership with CDP, trying to boost his company's failing stock prices. He'd never actually spoken to me or my board, but that hadn't stopped him from implying otherwise. The reception was held in the club's grand ballroom, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the ocean. The same ocean where, in less than 24 hours, my cruise would begin transforming the coastline. Ladies and gentlemen, Bradley's father stood up, tapping his glass. I have an exciting announcement to make. The room quieted. Amanda beamed, clearly in on whatever scheme they'd cooked up. I took a slow sip of champagne and waited. As many of you know, our family's company has been a leader in development for generations. Today, I'm thrilled to announce our newest venture, a partnership with Coastal Development Partners for the new Silver Bay Resort. Applause broke out. Amanda shot me a triumphant look from the head table. I simply checked my watch and stood up. Actually, I said, my voice carrying across the suddenly quiet room, I have an announcement of my own. All eyes turned to me. Mom's face went pale. Since Mr. Harrison has brought up the Silver Bay project, I should probably mention that demolition begins tomorrow at 9 a.m. sharp. And CDP has no partners in this venture. Never did, never will. The silence was deafening. But you can't. Bradley's father sputtered. We announced. You announced a lie, I corrected calmly. One that could be considered stock manipulation, given your company's public trading status. My lawyers will be in touch about that, by the way. Amanda stood up, her white dress rustling. You're ruining my wedding. No, Amanda. You tried to use your wedding to manipulate a business deal. There's a difference. I picked up my purse. The demolition crews are already in position. In fact, I pulled up a live feed on my phone and projected it onto the ballroom's display screen. The beach houses were visible, including my old one with construction equipment ready and waiting. Consider it my wedding gift to you, front row seats to watch your last attempt at exploiting me get demolished. Bradley's father was frantically working his phone, probably trying to contact his lawyers. Several guests were already leaving, no doubt rushing to dump their shares in his company before the market opened tomorrow. You heartless witch, Amanda hissed, tears streaking her perfect makeup. This was supposed to be my perfect day. And it still can be, I replied softly. Just not the way you planned. Sometimes perfect moments come from watching karma unfold. I walked to the door, then turned back one last time. Oh, and Mom? About that family duty you're so fond of mentioning? My duty was to show you all that success built on manipulation never lasts. Consider that lesson my contribution to the family legacy. The next morning I stood on the temporary platform we'd erected on the beach, surrounded by my actual business partners, local officials and media. The demolition countdown began as the sun rose over the water. My phone buzzed with a message from Amanda. I hope you're happy destroying our childhood memories. I typed back, not destroying, building something better. That's what real success looks like. As the first building came down, marking the beginning of the Silver Bay Resort project, I thought about Grandma. She'd left me that beach house not because she wanted it preserved forever, but because she knew I'd see its true potential. Sometimes, she used to say, you have to tear down the small dreams to build the big ones. The crowd cheered as the demolition continued. My project manager handed me the ceremonial hard hat and I smiled for the cameras. Tomorrow the headlines would read, CDP begins revolutionary coastal development, not family drama ruins society wedding. Because in the end, success isn't about what you tear down. It's about what you build in its place. And sometimes, the best foundation is built on the rubble of other people's expectations. 3 years later, I stood in the penthouse suite of the Silver Bay Resort, watching another sunset over the ocean. The property had exceeded all projections, becoming the most sought-after destination on the coast. A familiar face appeared in the reflection behind me, Amanda, looking older and slightly less polished. Your assistant said I'd find you here, she said quietly. Here to demand another wedding gift? I asked, not turning around. I heard about your divorce. No, she sighed. I came to say you were right. About everything. Bradley, his father, the way our family operated. I get it now. I turned to face her. Do you? The resort, it's incredible. You didn't just build a hotel, you created something that actually helps people. Jobs, tourism, environmental protections. She gestured to the view. It's so much better than a beach house for one family's ego. I smiled, remembering Grandma's words about small dreams and big ones. There's a junior executive position opening in our community relations department, I said carefully. If you're interested in learning how to build something real. Her eyes widened. You'd give me a chance? After everything. Not give. Offer. You'd have to earn it just like everyone else. She nodded slowly. I'd like that. To earn something for once. As we stood watching the sunset, I realized some demolitions make way for more than just new buildings. Sometimes they make space for new beginnings. I never thought I'd be thanking my parents for making me sleep in the basement, but life has a way of turning the darkest spaces into stepping stones. Before I tell you how I ended up owning the mansion where my sister's wedding turned into the most memorable day of my life, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. If you've ever been the less favored child or had to fight for your place in your own home, this story is for you. Hit that like button because the revenge in this story is sweeter than wedding cake. My name is Olivia Bennett, and at 28, I've learned that the best revenge isn't served cold. It's served with a perfectly timed property deed. But let me take you back to where it all began, in that basement that my parents claimed was good enough for me. Our house in suburban Boston was a sprawling Victorian mansion, a family heirloom passed down through generations. From the outside, with its pristine white paint and perfectly manicured gardens, it looked like the embodiment of the American dream. Inside, it was a monument to family favoritism that would make Cinderella's stepmother look fair-minded. My sister, Madison, was 3 years younger than me but somehow always managed to be the center of our parents' universe. From the moment she was born, with her perfect blonde curls and winning smile, she became their golden child. I, with my quiet nature and practical mindset, became the family afterthought. The basement bedroom became my space when I was 12, right after Madison decided she wanted the master suite I'd been using. Your sister needs more space for her dance trophies and social activities, Mom explained, not meeting my eyes as she helped move my belongings down the creaking stairs. Besides, you're always reading or studying. You don't need all that room. The basement was technically finished, but that's being generous. The concrete floors were covered with thin carpet that did little to mask the cold, and the walls were bare cinder block painted a depressing shade of beige. A small window near the ceiling let in just enough natural light to remind me of what I was missing upstairs. Meanwhile, Madison's new suite was a showcase of parental devotion. They renovated it completely, custom closets, a private bathroom with a spa tub and a sitting area for her friends. Madison needs to maintain certain social standards, Dad would say whenever I questioned the disparity. You don't understand the pressures she's under. The pressure of being perfect, I supposed, while I dealt with the pressure of being forgotten. My only ally in the house was our grandmother, Eleanor, who lived in the East Wing. She had grown up in the mansion and knew every creaky floorboard and hidden corner. This house has secrets, she would tell me during our late-night talks in her cozy sitting room. And sometimes, dear heart, being underestimated is your greatest advantage. Grandma Eleanor was different from my parents. Where they saw Madison's social butterfly nature as a sign of success, Grandma appreciated my quieter strengths. She was the one who helped me transform my basement space into something livable, bringing down her old Persian rugs to cover the cold floor and hanging vintage tapestries to warm the walls. More importantly, she taught me about the house's history and the family's financial legacy. Your great-great-grandfather built this place, she'd say, showing me old photographs and documents. He believed in building things to last, both houses and fortunes. I threw myself into academics and part-time jobs, knowing education was my ticket to independence. By 16, I was working at the local library after school and on weekends. My parents barely noticed my absence, too busy attending Madison's cheerleading competitions and social events. The contrast in their parenting became almost comical. When Madison got her first B+ in English, our parents hired a private tutor. When I made valedictorian, they missed the ceremony because Madison had a regional dance competition. "You don't need the recognition," Mom said when I showed her my acceptance letter to Harvard. "You've always been self-sufficient." She said it like it was a character flaw rather than a survival skill I'd developed out of necessity. The basement became my sanctuary and classroom. I learned to manage money by tracking every dollar earned from my jobs. I learned patience by planning my escape. And I learned resilience from the constant reminder that in my parents' eyes, I would always be the basement daughter. Grandma Eleanor's guidance became more focused during my high school years. She wasn't just teaching me about family history anymore. She was teaching me about investment, property management, and the power of quiet accumulation of wealth. "The basement has made you strong," she told me one night after a particularly difficult family dinner where my parents had praised Madison's mediocre grades while ignoring my scholarship offers. "It's taught you to build your own foundation." I didn't understand the full meaning of her words then, but I would later. College applications became another exercise in family dynamics. Madison applied to state schools with good social scenes. I applied to top-tier universities with strong business programs. When acceptance letters arrived, my parents' reactions were predictable. "Harvard? That's so expensive, Olivia." Dad frowned at my acceptance letter. "And Boston's so far from home." The same day, they celebrated Madison's acceptance to a local college by buying her a new car. "You can take out loans," Mom suggested, not looking up from planning Madison's graduation party. "You're good with money. You'll figure it out." What they didn't know was that Grandma Eleanor had been preparing for this moment. The night after the college discussion, she invited me to her sitting room and pulled out a heavy manila envelope. "Your great-great-grandfather believed in education," she said, sliding the envelope across the table. "He set up a trust for his descendants' education. Your parents never asked about it, too focused on their own inheritance. But you, my dear, are exactly the kind of student he wanted to support." Inside the envelope was documentation of a substantial educational trust, more than enough to cover Harvard's tuition and living expenses. "Why didn't you tell them about this?" I asked, stunned by the figures on the papers. Grandma's eyes twinkled. "Sometimes the best advantage is the one nobody knows you have. Your parents chose to put you in the basement, but they never understood that foundations are built from the bottom up." The summer before college, while Madison was celebrating with her friends and my parents were planning her elaborate going-away party, I was learning everything I could from Grandma Eleanor about our family's financial history. The mansion, it turned out, was part of a larger property portfolio that had been carefully managed through generations. The current ownership was complex, with shares divided among family members through various trusts and holdings. "Pay attention," Grandma would say as she walked me through property documents and financial statements. "Knowledge is power, especially when others underestimate your ability to understand it." The day I left for Harvard, my parents gave me a perfunctory goodbye, distracted by Madison's drama over her roommate assignments at the local college. Grandma Eleanor hugged me tightly and whispered, "Remember, the basement taught you to see what others miss. Don't waste that lesson." I didn't. At Harvard, I doubled in business and real estate development, working internships during every break. While Madison posted sorority pictures and partied, I was learning how to navigate property laws and investment strategies. My parents' dismissal of my achievements continued through college. They attended none of my presentations or honors ceremonies, always finding reasons why Madison's events took priority. "You understand," Mom would say. "You're the independent one." I did understand, but not in the way they meant. I understood that their perception of me as the basement daughter had nothing to do with my worth and everything to do with their limitations. During my junior year, Grandma Eleanor's health began to decline. Our late-night discussions moved from her sitting room to her bedroom, But her lessons became more urgent. "The mansion isn't just a house," she told me one night, her voice weaker but her eyes sharp as ever. "It's a symbol of family legacy. Your parents never understood that. They see it as a status symbol, a backdrop for Madison's social life. But you, my basement girl, you understand foundations." She passed away during my senior year, leaving one final lesson in her will. The reading of the will was held in the mansion's library, with the family gathered in their usual positions. My parents and Madison front and center, me in the back like a shadow. The lawyer's announcement stunned everyone. Grandma Eleanor had left me her substantial investment portfolio and her shares in the family property holdings. To my parents and Madison she left only personal items and a small trust. "There must be some mistake," Dad protested, face reddening. "Eleanor wouldn't leave everything to the basement daughter?" I finished for him, speaking up from my corner. "Maybe she saw something you didn't." That day marked the beginning of a shift, though my parents tried to ignore it. They continued treating me as an afterthought, even as I graduated summa cum laude and began building my own real estate investment firm. Madison's life continued on its predictable path. She took a job at a local boutique, more focused on social media influence than career growth. When she met Bradley Winston, son of a prominent local family, my parents were ecstatic. Finally, a wedding to plan. Mom gushed during one of our rare family dinners. "We'll host it here, of course. The mansion will be perfect." I sat quietly, letting them plan their perfect event in what they still thought of as their perfect house. They had no idea that I'd been quietly acquiring more shares in the family properties through various investment vehicles. They didn't notice when I started having repairs done on the mansion, assuming it was part of their regular maintenance. They didn't question when I hired landscapers to restore the gardens to their original glory. "The basement suite needs renovation," Mom mentioned one day, not looking at me. "Bradley's family might want to stay over during wedding events." I smiled, thinking of my old room. "Don't worry about the basement," I said. "I'll take care of it." They assumed I meant I'd clean it up, never questioning why I had the authority to make renovation decisions. They were too busy planning Madison's perfect wedding to notice that their perfect world was about to shift dramatically. The weeks leading up to the wedding were a flurry of activity. Florists, caterers, and decorators transformed the mansion into a fairy tale setting. Madison held court in her master suite, now filled with wedding gowns and bridesmaids' dresses. I watched it all from my newly renovated office in the city, waiting for the perfect moment to reveal what the basement daughter had been building all these years. The morning of the wedding arrived bright and clear, perfect weather for the outdoor ceremony planned in the mansion's gardens. As I dressed in my bridesmaid's gown, Madison had included me more out of obligation than affection. I thought about Grandma Eleanor's words about foundations and legacies. The time had come to show everyone exactly what the basement had taught me about building from the bottom up. The 6 months leading up to Madison's wedding were a masterclass in family obliviousness. While my parents and sister focused on creating the perfect fairy tale wedding, I was finalizing the last pieces of my carefully constructed plan. My company, Foundation Capital Investments, had grown significantly since its launch 3 years after my Harvard graduation. What started as a small real estate investment firm had expanded into a major player in the Boston property market. Of course, my family remained blissfully unaware of my success, still introducing me as Madison's sister at family gatherings. "Olivia does something with apartments," Mom would vaguely explain when pressed, before quickly shifting the conversation back to Madison's wedding plans or Bradley's promising career in his family's law firm. The irony was that by this point my real estate portfolio included several premium commercial properties in downtown Boston, including the building where Bradley's law firm rented office space. I'd attended their lease renewal meetings under my company's name, OB Enterprises, while Bradley had no idea he was negotiating with his future sister-in-law. 3 months before the wedding I made my final move. Using a combination of Grandma Eleanor's inherited shares and my own acquisitions, I consolidated ownership of the mansion under my company's umbrella. The paperwork was filed quietly, the transfer of ownership handled discreetly through my attorneys. My parents, caught up in wedding preparations, signed the documents I presented without reading them carefully, assuming they were routine property maintenance authorizations. "Just handling some updates for the wedding," I explained, watching them scrawl their signatures on papers that effectively transferred their remaining ownership rights to me. The mansion's renovation became my personal project, though my family assumed I was just being helpful with wedding preparations. I hired the best contractors in Boston to restore every inch of the property to its original glory, paying particular attention to certain areas that held special meaning. The basement, my old room, was transformed into a state-of-the-art wine cellar and tasting room, with custom wooden racks and climate control systems. "How thoughtful," Mom commented when she saw it. "Bradley's family will love this for the reception." She never once acknowledged that this had been my living space for years. I converted Grandma Eleanor's East Wing into a private library and study, preserving her sitting room exactly as it had been during our late-night conversations. Her presence seemed to linger there, encouraging me as I finalized the details of my plan. Madison's beloved master suite received an extensive upgrade, though she assumed it was part of Mom and Dad's wedding gift to her. "The crown molding is perfect for my wedding photos," she gushed during the final fitting of her designer gown. "I'm so glad Daddy spared no expense." I let them all believe what they wanted to believe. After all, they'd spent years seeing only what they expected to see. My personal life wasn't completely consumed by this elaborate plan. I'd met Alexander Drake, a fellow Harvard graduate who ran his own technology investment firm, at a charity gala 2 years earlier. He understood ambition and the complexity of family dynamics, having built his own success despite his parents' initial disapproval of his career choices. "Are you sure you want to wait until the wedding to tell them?" he asked one evening as we reviewed the final property documents in my office. "It's a bit dramatic even for a family revelation." I smiled, thinking of all the family events where I'd been relegated to the background, all the achievements that had gone unacknowledged. "They chose the setting for their perfect family moment," I replied. "It seems fitting to use it for mine." Alex understood. He'd been my date to enough family dinners to see how they treated me, how they dismissed my contributions while fawning over Madison's latest social media milestone or Bradley's minor legal victories. The week before the wedding, I moved into the mansion's West Wing, supposedly to help with last-minute preparations. My parents were too preoccupied with the arriving guests to question why I was setting up an office in what had been my father's study. I spent those nights walking the halls of my house, because it was mine now, every square foot of it, remembering all the moments that had led to this. The kitchen where I'd eaten quick dinners alone while the family celebrated Madison's achievements in the dining room. The grand staircase I'd been told not to use because Madison's friends might come over. The basement that had taught me to build my own light in the darkness. Wedding guests began arriving 3 days before the ceremony. Bradley's family, the wealthy Winstons, took over the newly renovated guest suites. My parents fawned over them, eager to impress their future in-laws with what they still thought of as their family mansion. "The house has been in our family for generations," Dad boasted during the rehearsal dinner hosted in the formal dining room. "We've maintained all its original grandeur." I caught Alex's eye across the table, noting his subtle smirk. He'd helped me review the property's maintenance records during the acquisition. My parents had actually neglected significant structural issues over the years, too focused on surface appearances. It had taken considerable investment on my part to restore the mansion's true grandeur. The night before the wedding, I found Madison in her suite, surrounded by wedding finery. For a moment, looking at her surrounded by luxury she'd always taken for granted, I felt a twinge of sympathy. She'd been shaped by our parents' favoritism as much as I had, just in a different way. "Need any help?" I offered, standing in the doorway. She looked up, surprised. We'd never been close, our relationship defined by the roles we'd been assigned in childhood. "Thanks, but I've got my bridesmaids coming over." She paused, then added awkwardly, "You can help with the guest favors if you want. They're in the basement." Of course. The basement. Some habits died hard. "Actually," I replied, "I have some work to finish up in the study. But everything will be perfect tomorrow. I've made sure of it." She didn't catch the weight in my words, already distracted by a text from one of her bridesmaids. I left her there, surrounded by the trappings of the perfect wedding our parents had planned in my house. That night I sat in Grandma Eleanor's sitting room, now my private study, reviewing the documents I'd need for tomorrow. The property deed, ownership transfers, renovation receipts. Everything that proved what the basement daughter had built while they weren't paying attention. Alex joined me there, loosening his tie after the rehearsal dinner. "Your grandmother would be proud," he said, looking around the preserved room. "She taught you well." "She taught me that foundations matter," I replied, touching the antique desk where she'd first shown me the family's property documents. "And that sometimes the strongest structures are built in the dark." Tomorrow, in the middle of Madison's perfect wedding reception, everyone would learn exactly what the basement had built. My parents would finally understand what they'd missed while focusing on their golden child. The mansion's true owner would be revealed, and the family dynamic would shift permanently. As I prepared for bed in my new master suite, not Madison's old one, but a completely renovated wing that suited my tastes, I thought about the journey from the basement to here. Every dismissal, every missed achievement, every cold night in that concrete room had led to this moment. Tomorrow, the basement daughter would welcome everyone to her house. And nothing would ever be the same. The morning of Madison's wedding dawned exactly as perfect as my parents had prayed for: clear blue skies, mild temperature, and just enough breeze to make the garden roses dance. I stood at the window of my study, watching the flurry of activity below as workers arranged chairs on the lawn and erected the elaborate floral arch where my sister would say her vows. Everything was perfect, exactly as they'd planned. Just not quite in the way they'd expected. The mansion buzzed with activity. My mother fluttered between rooms in her silk robe, directing staff and fussing over details. My father held court in what he still thought of as his study, sharing cigars with Bradley's father and talking about family legacy. Madison remained sequestered in her suite with her bridesmaids, probably sharing mimosas and Instagram stories. I dressed carefully in my bridesmaid's gown, a designer piece in blush pink that cost more than my entire teenage wardrobe. The irony wasn't lost on me that Madison had chosen the color because it made everyone look secondary to the bride. Today that wouldn't be the case. Alex arrived early, impeccable in his tailored suit. "Ready for this?" he asked, helping me fasten my grandmother's pearl necklace, another inheritance my parents had questioned. "I've been ready since the basement," I replied, touching the property deed secured in my clutch bag. "Some celebrations are worth waiting for." The ceremony itself was a showcase of excess. 500 guests filled the garden chairs. Society's finest gathered to witness the union of the Winston and Bennett families. String quartets played as the bridal party processed down the petal-strewn aisle. Madison floated toward her future husband in a custom gown that cost more than a college education. I played my part perfectly, holding my sister's bouquet and smiling for photographs. My parents beamed from the front row, their golden child's perfect day unfolding exactly as they'd imagined. Bradley's parents sat beside them, already discussing future family gatherings at the Bennett estate. After the ceremony, guests moved to the reception tent set up on the east lawn. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, their light catching on hand-painted china and silver settings for hundreds. The champagne alone cost more than my first car, though now I was the one who had signed off on the expenses. The first hint that something was different came during the father-daughter dance. Dad, slightly flushed from champagne, took the microphone to make a toast. "Welcome everyone to our family home," he began, gesturing grandly. "For generations the Bennett mansion has been." "Excuse me," I interrupted, standing from my seat at the family table. "I believe there's been a misunderstanding about the hosting duties." The room quieted. Madison, still in my father's arms mid-dance, frowned in confusion. My mother's perfect smile froze in place. "Olivia," Dad said warningly, "this isn't the time for—" "Actually," I continued, opening my clutch and removing the property deed, "this is exactly the time. Welcome everyone to my home." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the string quartet stopped playing. "What are you talking about?" Madison demanded, stepping away from our father. "This is our family home." I corrected, my voice carrying clearly through the stunned reception tent. "While you were planning your perfect wedding, you never bothered to check who owned the perfect venue." I nodded to Alex, who stood and began distributing copies of the property documents to key family members. My parents, Bradley's parents, and the family lawyer, who looked increasingly uncomfortable. 3 months ago, I continued, watching my father's face drain of color as he read the papers, the Bennett mansion and grounds were fully consolidated under my company's ownership. Every renovation, every upgrade, Every perfect detail of this wedding was approved and paid for by me. "This is impossible," Mom whispered, but the lawyer was already nodding reluctantly, confirming the document's authenticity. "Remember the basement?" I asked, looking directly at my parents. "While you were giving Madison the master suite and telling me I didn't deserve better, I was learning about foundations. Grandma Eleanor taught me well." Bradley's father, a shrewd businessman, was the first to fully grasp the situation. "The Bennett mansion is owned by OB Enterprises," he said slowly. "Olivia Bennett. You're the property developer who's been buying up half of Boston's historic estates." Madison's perfect complexion had turned ashen. But this is my wedding. You can't." "Can't what?" I asked calmly. "Can't own the house I grew up in? Can't succeed beyond your expectations? Can't rise from the basement?" The murmurs among the guests grew louder. Years of society gossip about the Bennett sisters was being rapidly revised as my success became apparent. "Why didn't you tell us?" Dad demanded, his voice mixing anger with dawning recognition of what they'd missed. "I tried. For years I tried to show you my achievements, my potential. But you were too busy looking up at Madison to see what was growing in the basement." I turned to address the gathered guests. "Please enjoy the celebration. Consider this my housewarming party as well as my sister's wedding." The next hour was chaos, but controlled chaos. My parents huddled with Bradley's family, probably doing damage control about the shift in family dynamics. Madison alternated between tears and accusations, her perfect day now overshadowed by her basement-dwelling sister's revelation. But something unexpected happened too. Guests began approaching me not with condemnation but with interest. Business cards were exchanged. Investment opportunities were discussed. The basement daughter had emerged into the light, and she had built something worth noticing. "I always knew there was something special about you," my third cousin Margaret declared, eyes shining with renewed family connection. "You have Eleanor's spark." As the evening progressed, the initial shock gave way to a new reality. My parents aged years and hours, their carefully constructed narrative of family success crumbling around them. Madison's glow dimmed as she realized she was no longer the center of attention at her own wedding. Bradley, to his credit, handled the situation better than expected. "I should have known," he said when we spoke privately. "The lease negotiations for our firm's offices were too professional to be the old Bennett management." Near midnight, as the celebration wound down, I found myself in Grandma Eleanor's sitting room, my sitting room now. My parents appeared in the doorway, looking uncertain for the first time in my memory. "Why this way?" Mom asked quietly. "Why at Madison's wedding?" I considered the question, touching the desk where Grandma had first taught me about property values and family legacy. "Because you gave me the basement and told me I deserved nothing better," I replied. "I needed you to understand that the basement built something you never saw coming." "We underestimated you," Dad admitted, looking older than I'd ever seen him. "We were wrong." "Yes," I agreed simply. "You were." They left shortly after, their perfect world permanently altered. Madison and Bradley departed for their honeymoon, though the celebration had become more of a coming-out party for the family's true success story. Alex found me later in what had been my basement room, now a premium wine cellar. "How does it feel?" he asked, pulling me close. I looked around the transformed space, remembering the cold concrete and thin carpeting. "It feels like foundation," I replied. "Sometimes you have to start in the basement to build something strong." The mansion settled around us, creaking and sighing as old houses do. But now it spoke of different things, not of favoritism and forgotten daughters, but of persistence and quiet triumph. The basement daughter had risen, bringing with her all the lessons learned in the dark. 3 months after the wedding, I received a letter from Madison. Her perfect life had shifted. Bradley's firm was now my tenant, and her social circle had to reconcile her carefully curated image with her more successful sister. "I never saw you," she wrote. "None of us did. I'm sorry for that." I read the letter in my study, surrounded by the evidence of what can be built from a basement foundation. Outside, garden workers were preparing the grounds for winter, following my instructions to preserve Grandma Eleanor's beloved roses. The basement had taught me patience, resilience, and the power of being underestimated. It had shaped me into someone who could rise above expectations and build something lasting. Welcome to my house indeed. I never thought owning a multi-million-dollar beach property empire would be my best-kept secret. But watching my sister's face transform from smug superiority to shocked disbelief made every moment of hiding my success worth it. Before I tell you how my carefully maintained facade crumbled in the most satisfying way possible, let me know in the comments if you've ever been underestimated by family. If this story resonates with you, hit that like button and subscribe because trust me, the revenge is sweeter than ocean breeze. My name is Victoria Parker, and at 32, I had what anyone would call a perfectly crafted double life. To my family, I was the struggling youngest daughter who never lived up to her potential. In reality, I was the silent owner of Parker Coast Properties, one of the fastest-growing luxury real estate companies in Southern California. Growing up in suburban Michigan, I was always the odd one out in our picture-perfect family of 4. My parents, James and Margaret Parker, had built their lives around my older sister Diana's achievements. Diana, with her perfect grades, homecoming queen crown, and full scholarship to Stanford, set a standard I apparently could never reach. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" became the soundtrack of my childhood. While Diana excelled at debate club and student government, I spent hours studying real estate listings and property investment strategies. My father, a high school economics teacher, dismissed my interests as unrealistic dreams. "The real estate market is for people with capital, Victoria," he'd say, barely looking up from Diana's latest academic award. "Focus on something practical." Even my mother, though gentler in her approach, echoed his doubts. "Honey, perhaps you should consider teaching like your father. It's a stable career." The only person who ever encouraged my passion was my grandmother, Elizabeth. During summer visits to her small beach cottage in California, she would sit with me for hours, poring over property listings and teaching me about market trends. "You have an eye for potential, Victoria," she'd say, watching me analyze beachfront developments. "Don't let anyone dim your vision." Those summers with Grandma Elizabeth became my sanctuary and education. In her modest library filled with books on real estate investment and business strategy, I discovered my future. While my family thought I was just enjoying beach vacations, I was actually building the foundation of my empire. By 18, I had mapped out my entire career path. While Diana headed to Stanford, I chose a local college, majoring in business administration with a focus on real estate management. My parents saw it as settling for less. I saw it as strategic positioning. "At least she's going to college," I overheard my mother tell a friend. "Though I wish she'd aimed higher like Diana." What they didn't know was that I was already working part-time for a local real estate agency, learning the industry from the ground up. Every commission I earned went straight into a separate savings account, my future investment fund. Grandmother Elizabeth passed away during my sophomore year, leaving me her beach cottage and, more importantly, her extensive network of real estate contacts. My parents assumed the cottage was a burden, an old property that I couldn't afford to maintain. "You should sell it," Dad advised. "Use the money for something practical." Instead, I used the cottage as collateral for my first major investment, a foreclosed beachfront property that I renovated and flipped for triple the purchase price. That success became the cornerstone of Parker Coast Properties, though the company was registered under a holding corporation that couldn't be traced back to me. Over the next 10 years, I built my business carefully and quietly. To my family, I remained the underachieving daughter who worked in real estate. They assumed as a low-level agent. Meanwhile, my company acquired prime beachfront properties up and down the California coast, renovating them into luxury vacation rentals and exclusive residences. Diana's path followed our parents' perfect script. After Stanford, she married Michael Thompson, a successful corporate lawyer, and they settled into an upper-middle-class life in Chicago. Their annual Christmas cards showcased their growing family and increasing prosperity, always accompanied by subtle digs at my apparent lack of progress. "We're so blessed," Diana would write. "Though we pray Victoria will find her path soon." I maintained my cover perfectly, living in a modest apartment and driving a reasonable car when visiting family. During these visits, I endured endless comparisons and thinly veiled disappointment. "Diana just made partner at her consulting firm," Mom would say over dinner. "Isn't that wonderful, Victoria? Perhaps she could help you find a better position." The facade might have continued indefinitely if Diana hadn't decided she deserved a piece of my grandmother's legacy. It started with a phone call on a Tuesday morning as I was reviewing acquisition proposals in my private office. Not that my family knew about the sleek downtown headquarters of Parker Coast Properties. "Vicky," Diana's voice dripped with artificial sweetness. "I've been thinking about Grandma's beach cottage." I knew that tone. It was the same one she'd used when convincing our parents to give her my college fund because she needed it more. "What about it?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral as I signed off on a $12 million property purchase. "Well, Michael and I want to start taking the kids on regular beach vacations, and that cottage would be perfect. I know you can barely afford the upkeep, so we'd be willing to buy it from you. We'd even let you visit occasionally." The audacity of her assumption made me grip my pen tighter, but I maintained my calm. "The cottage isn't for sale, Diana. Don't be difficult, Vicky. We both know you're struggling. Michael and I would offer a fair price, and you could use the money to finally get your life together." Before I could respond, she continued with what she clearly thought was a generous offer. "We're planning a family vacation next month. Why don't you join us? We can discuss the details then. I've already found the perfect rental property right near the cottage." That's when I realized Diana had already booked one of my company's luxury beach houses, though she had no idea it belonged to me. The irony was delicious. "Which property?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "The Azure Cove Villa. It's gorgeous, 6 bedrooms, private beach access, infinity pool. Obviously way out of your price range, but you can stay with us since you're family." The Azure Cove Villa was actually my personal favorite among my properties, a $15 million estate that I'd renovated myself. The fact that Diana had unknowingly rented it from me while simultaneously dismissing my success was almost poetic. "Sure," I said, a plan forming in my mind. "I'd love to join you." "Perfect. Mom and Dad are coming too. It'll be just like old times." As I hung up, I looked around my office with its wall of awards and acquisitions. For 10 years I'd hidden my success to avoid family drama. But perhaps it was time for the truth to come out, in the most spectacular way possible. The next few weeks passed in a blur of preparation. I coordinated with my property manager, Sarah, to ensure everything would be perfect for the upcoming revelation. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Sarah asked as we reviewed the arrangements. "Once they know, everything will change." "It's time," I replied, thinking of Diana's condescending tone. "They need to see who I really am." The day of the family vacation arrived with picture-perfect weather. I drove my modest car to the Azure Cove Villa, arriving just after my family. Diana, Michael, and their 3 children were already exploring the property while our parents unpacked their luxury SUV. "Victoria," Mom called out, her tone carrying familiar disappointment. "Couldn't you have dressed more appropriately for the beach?" I looked down at my simple sundress, hiding a smile. They had no idea it was a custom-made piece that cost more than their car. "Leave her alone," Diana said with false generosity. "Not everyone can afford a proper vacation wardrobe." The next hour was a parade of subtle jabs and patronizing comments as Diana showed off her vacation home, acting as if she owned the place. Mom and Dad oohed and awed over every feature, while Michael made pointed comments about his recent bonus. "The rental agent is coming by to give us a proper tour," Diana announced as we gathered on the terrace. "Though Victoria, you might want to make yourself scarce. We wouldn't want them to think we're exceeding the guest limit." That was my cue. I pulled out my phone and sent a quick text to Sarah. Everything was about to change. The doorbell rang and Diana rushed to answer it, ready to play the role of wealthy client. I heard Sarah's professional voice in the foyer. "Good afternoon, I'm here to welcome the guests of Azure Cove Villa." "Yes, that's us," Diana said proudly. "We're so excited to be here." "Wonderful," Sarah replied, stepping onto the terrace. "I just need to confirm some details with the owner first." Diana's smile faltered slightly. "Oh, is the owner coming by?" Sarah's eyes met mine and she smiled. "The owner is already here." The silence that fell over the terrace was deafening. Diana's perfectly maintained smile froze as Sarah walked directly toward me, portfolio in hand. "Miss Parker," Sarah said professionally, though I caught the slight gleam of anticipation in her eyes. "Everything is prepared according to your specifications. Would you like to conduct the property tour yourself?" Diana laughed nervously. "There must be some mistake. My sister Victoria is just visiting. She could never afford." "Actually," I interrupted smoothly, standing up, I think it's time for some honesty. I turned to Sarah. Could you bring the property portfolios from the car? As Sarah left, my family stared at me in confusion. Mom clutched her designer handbag like a shield, while Dad's expression wavered between disbelief and dawning realization. What's going on, Victoria? Michael demanded, his lawyer instincts clearly sensing something big was about to happen. I walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Pacific, remembering how I'd personally selected every detail of this house during its renovation. You know, Diana, when you called about Grandma's cottage, it made me realize something. I've been hiding who I am for far too long. Sarah returned with a sleek leather portfolio bearing the Parker Coast Properties logo. My family's eyes followed it as I placed it on the glass coffee table. 10 years ago, I continued opening the portfolio. I started a company. Today, Parker Coast Properties owns 37 luxury beachfront properties across Southern California, including this one. I gestured to our surroundings. Total portfolio value, just over $400 million. The only sound was the distant crash of waves and my mother's sharp intake of breath. Diana's face had drained of color. That's impossible, she stammered. You're just a real estate agent. I smiled, pulling out the company financials. Actually, I'm the founder and CEO. Everything you see here, the infinity pool you admired, the imported marble countertops, even the artwork in the foyer, I personally selected during the renovation. Dad stepped forward, his economics teacher instincts kicking in. Show me, he demanded, reaching for the portfolio. For the next 30 minutes, I walked them through my empire. The property acquisitions, the renovation projects, the rental income streams, everything I'd built while they assumed I was failing. But how? Mom finally asked, her voice small. Where did you get the startup capital? Remember Grandma's cottage? The one Diana thinks I can't afford to maintain. I pressed a button on a remote and a large screen descended from the ceiling. This is what I did with my inheritance. Images appeared showing the transformation of Grandma's modest cottage into a boutique luxury rental property. It generates $40,000 per month in peak season. That was just the beginning. Michael, ever the lawyer, was scrutinizing the financial statements. These profit margins are impressive, he admitted grudgingly. But why keep it secret? I thought back to all the family dinners where they dismissed my career, the Christmas cards full of subtle digs, the constant comparisons to Diana's successful path. At first, it was about proving to myself that I could do it without anyone's help or interference. Then, as the company grew, I realized something. Your underestimation of me was actually an advantage. No one questions the struggling sister. No one looks too closely at her business dealings. It was the perfect cover. Diana, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly found her voice. So all this time when we were trying to help you, offering you opportunities, you were what? Laughing at us? Help me. I repeated incredulously. You mean like trying to pressure me into selling Grandma's cottage? Or suggesting I needed Diana's connections to find a better position? Sarah, who had been quietly observing, chose this moment to interject. Ms. Parker, the property tour is scheduled to begin. Should I proceed with the full portfolio presentation? I nodded, watching my family's reactions carefully. Yes, I think it's time they saw everything. What followed was a meticulously planned revelation of my entire real estate empire. Sarah pulled up detailed presentations of each property, including the private beach clubs, the luxury vacation rentals, and the exclusive residential developments. This is our latest acquisition, Sarah explained, displaying images of a stunning cliffside estate. Purchased last month for $28 million. Ms. Parker personally oversees all major property decisions. My parents, who had once dismissed my real estate dreams as unrealistic, sat in stunned silence as the true scope of my success became clear. But your apartment in Michigan, Mom protested weakly. Your old car. A cover, I explained. My real residence is the penthouse in our Newport Beach development. As for cars, I smiled. Sarah, could you show them the garage? The screen displayed the underground garage of my actual home, where my collection of luxury vehicles sat gleaming. Diana's husband Michael actually whistled at the sight of the rare vintage Aston Martin. The modest car I drive to family events is just for appearances, I explained. Like everything else you thought you knew about my life. As the presentation continued, I could see the shift in my family's dynamics happening in real time. The confidence with which Diana had walked into the villa was crumbling. Dad's dismissive attitude had transformed into something approaching respect, while Mom seemed torn between pride and embarrassment. "There's one more thing you should know," I said, saving the biggest revelation for last. "Remember how you found this rental listing, Diana?" She nodded uncertainly. "It wasn't actually available for rent. None of my properties are at the moment." I paused for effect. "I made an exception and had this one listed briefly when I heard you were looking. Consider it my way of finally revealing the truth." "You manipulated us?" Diana's voice rose with indignation. "I created an opportunity," I corrected. "You're the one who chose this property, bragged about being able to afford it, and suggested I should make myself scarce during the rental agent's visit." The sun was setting over the Pacific, casting long shadows across the terrace. Sarah discreetly withdrew, leaving my family to process everything they'd learned. "So what happens now?" Dad asked, his teacher's analytical mind clearly trying to make sense of this new reality. I walked to the wine cellar and returned with a bottle of rare vintage champagne. "Now we celebrate the truth. And tomorrow we begin a new chapter. One where you see me for who I really am." As I poured the champagne into crystal flutes, I could feel the weight of 10 years of secrets lifting from my shoulders. The carefully maintained facade had crumbled, but in its place stood something stronger, the truth of my success. "To new beginnings," I proposed, raising my glass. My family raised their glasses automatically, still somewhat shell-shocked. As the expensive champagne sparkled in the fading sunlight, I knew the real test was yet to come. How would they adjust to this new reality? Would Diana accept that her struggling sister was actually wildly successful? Could my parents reconcile their decades of doubt with the evidence of my achievements? The answers would come soon enough. For now, I savored the moment of revelation, watching the last rays of sun glint off the infinity pool I'd designed in the house I owned, surrounded by the family who finally had to acknowledge my true worth. The morning after my revelation dawned with a different energy. I woke early in the master suite, the one Diana had tried to claim when they first arrived, and made my way to the terrace. The ocean stretched endlessly before me, a reminder of how far I'd come from that little girl studying property listings in Grandma's cottage. The sound of footsteps made me turn. Dad stood in the doorway, looking somehow older in the morning light. "You're up early," I said, gesturing to the coffee maker I'd already started. He poured himself a cup, his economics teacher habits showing in how he measured his words before speaking. I couldn't sleep much. Kept going over the numbers in my head. "And your profit margins are exceptional." He paused. "I spent years telling you to be more practical, to think smaller. I was wrong." Coming from my father, this admission was seismic. Before I could respond, Mom appeared, already dressed for the day but missing her usual polish. "Victoria," she began, then stopped, seemingly unsure how to continue. The woman who had always known exactly what to say to highlight my shortcomings was now speechless. "Good morning, Mom," I said calmly, pouring her a cup of coffee. "Sleep well." She accepted the cup with trembling hands. "I kept thinking about all the times the things we said to you." "You mean like suggesting I should consider teaching because it's stable?" I couldn't resist the small dig. Mom's face flushed. "We thought we were helping. Protecting you from disappointment. By constantly disappointing me yourselves?" The silence that followed was heavy with decades of misunderstandings and missed connections. "I reviewed your company's portfolio again last night," Dad said, pulling out his reading glasses and some notes he'd made. "The way you leveraged Grandma's cottage as seed capital, the strategic property acquisitions, the timing of your market entries." He shook his head in amazement. "It's brilliant. Seems those unrealistic dreams paid off after all," I replied, watching his expression carefully. Before he could respond, Diana emerged onto the terrace, looking less put together than I'd ever seen her. Michael trailed behind, clutching his phone like a lifeline. "I just got off the phone with our financial advisor," Michael announced without preamble. "Trying to understand how we missed this. Your company's market position is remarkable." Diana shot him a look that could freeze hell. "Really, Michael? You're impressed by her deceiving everyone for years." "Diana," Mom started, but I held up my hand. Let's address this directly, I said, turning to my sister. You're upset because I hid my success. But ask yourself why I felt the need to hide it. Because you enjoyed making us look foolish? Diana snapped. No, I replied calmly. Because every achievement in my life has been measured against yours. Every choice I made was questioned because it didn't follow your path. Even now, you're more angry about losing the upper hand than happy for my success. The truth of my words hung in the morning air. Diana's face cycled through emotions, anger, embarrassment, and finally something approaching understanding. I want to show you something, I said, standing up. All of you. I led them to my home office in the villa, a room they hadn't seen during yesterday's tour. The walls were lined with framed documents. My first property deed, the company's incorporation papers, awards for architectural design and business innovation. But I directed their attention to a particular frame in the center. This is the first letter Grandma wrote to me after I started the company, I explained. She was the only one who knew the truth. Mom stepped forward to read it, her eyes widening at our grandmother's words. My dearest Victoria, your latest acquisition makes my heart soar. While others see you through the lens of comparison, I see you building an empire with quiet determination. One day they'll understand what I've always known, that your different path wasn't wrong, just extraordinary. All my love. Grandma Elizabeth. She knew. Mom whispered. All this time. She knew because she believed in me enough to look closer, I replied. She never needed me to be anyone but myself. Diana had moved to examine the industry awards. The Innovative Developer of the Year award. That was you? I remember reading about it in the business journal. Yes, I confirmed. That property renovation project you praised last Christmas? The one you told everyone was exactly what that rundown beach area needed? That was mine too. The irony wasn't lost on any of us. Why tell us now? Dad asked. Why not maintain what did you call it? Your cover. I walked to the windows overlooking the coast, my coast in many ways. Because success without authenticity becomes hollow. I'm proud of what I've built. I'm tired of hiding it. And the cottage? Diana asked quietly. I suppose my offer to buy it seems ridiculous now. The cottage stays exactly as it is, the foundation of everything I've built. But, I turned to face them, I'm willing to discuss a proper family vacation arrangement. One based on mutual respect, not assumed superiority. The next few hours were filled with detailed conversations about my business, my life, and the future of our family relationships. Mom cried when I showed her my real home through photos. The penthouse she'd never seen. Dad asked countless questions about my investment strategies, his pride finally outweighing his preconceptions. Michael, ever the pragmatist, proposed potential business collaborations which I politely deflected. Some boundaries were still necessary. As for Diana, the adjustment was more complicated. Years of being the family's measure of success had shaped her identity as much as being the unsuccessful sister had shaped mine. I don't know how to be your sister without being your superior, she admitted during a private moment on the beach that afternoon. Try being my equal, I suggested. It's more interesting than looking down on people. By the time the sun set on our second day at Azure Cove Villa, the initial shock had evolved into something more nuanced. Mom and Dad were wrestling with their regret while trying to express their pride. Diana was quietly reevaluating our entire relationship. Michael was still making notes about my business model. As we gathered for dinner, catered by my private chef, another revelation that delighted Mom and annoyed Diana, I raised my glass for a toast. To family, I said, and to seeing people as they are, not as we assume them to be. The echo of "to family" around the table carried different weights for each person. For Mom and Dad it was tinged with remorse and hope. For Diana, it was a reluctant acknowledgement of a new reality. For me it was liberation. Later that night, as the family settled into their rooms, I returned to the terrace. Sarah had stopped by with some company documents needing my attention. Actual work didn't stop for family revelations. "How are you feeling?" she asked as I signed the papers. Relief? Regret? I considered the question, looking out at my carefully built world that was no longer a secret. Authentic. Finally. And your family? They're adjusting. It's not perfect, but it's real. That's worth more than any property in our portfolio. As Sarah left, I received a text from Diana. Can't sleep. Too many thoughts. Coffee tomorrow? Just us. I smiled, typing back, yes. I know a great little beach cafe. I own it. The response came quickly, of course you do. Show off. It wasn't quite an apology, but it was a start. A new chapter where success didn't have to be hidden and family relationships could be rebuilt on a foundation of truth rather than assumptions. Looking out at the moonlit ocean, I thought about Grandma Elizabeth and how she'd encouraged me to follow my own path. She'd known that sometimes the greatest success isn't just in achieving your dreams, but in finally being able to share them. If you've ever been underestimated, dismissed, or pushed to hide your light, remember this. Success doesn't need to follow someone else's path. Your journey might be different, might need to be hidden for a while, but when the time comes to reveal your truth, make it count. Have you ever had to hide your success from family? Or felt the need to downplay your achievements to keep the peace? Share your story in the comments below. And if this journey of hidden success and sweet revelation resonated with you, don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories about triumph over underestimation. Remember, sometimes the greatest power lies not in proving others wrong, but in finally letting them see exactly who you are. The annual Stevens family dinner was always a masterclass in subtle cruelty, but this year felt different. Maybe because I knew something they didn't, or maybe because after 15 years of disappointment, I was finally ready to let the mask slip. I sat at the far end of my parents' mahogany dining table, watching my sister Amanda showcase her new engagement ring, a gaudy diamond that caught the chandelier light like a disco ball. She worked as a senior financial analyst at Meridian Tech, the same company where our father had spent the last 30 years climbing to middle management. 3 promotions in 4 years, Dad beamed, raising his wine glass. That's my girl. Following in her old man's footsteps. Mom dabbed her lips with a napkin, pride radiating from her perfectly maintained facade. And now engaged to the department head. We always knew you'd make us proud, sweetheart. I took a slow sip of water, letting the ice clink against my teeth. The irony wasn't lost on me. 4 years, they'd positioned Amanda as the family success story. The one who did everything right, who followed the prescribed path to respectability. Meanwhile, I was the cautionary tale. So, Sarah, Amanda turned to me, lips curved in what others might mistake for sisterly concern. Still doing that, what do you call it? Consulting thing? Something like that, I replied quietly. Dad's face darkened. He'd never forgiven me for leaving Meridian Tech 5 years ago, turning down the entry-level position he'd arranged. At least your sister has a real career, he scoffed. Not some makeshift freelance operation. The words stung, but not for the reasons they thought. I wasn't hurt by the dismissal. I was tired of maintaining the lie. What they didn't know, what none of them had bothered to discover, was that my consulting thing had evolved into Shadow Peak Ventures, one of the most aggressive private equity firms in the tech sector. We operated in stealth mode, acquiring undervalued companies and restructuring them from the inside out. And tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., we were finalizing our biggest acquisition yet, Meridian Tech. I'd spent 2 years orchestrating this deal through shell companies and proxy investors, making sure my name never appeared on any public documents. The board had approved the sale last week, desperate for the bailout after years of mismanagement had left them vulnerable. Only 3 people knew I was the actual buyer. My lawyer, my CFO, and Gregory Phillips, Meridian CEO. The same man my father had been unsuccessfully trying to get a meeting with for the past decade. I hear Meridian's going through some changes, I said casually, watching my father's face. Any rumors in middle management? He straightened his tie, always eager to prove his insider knowledge. Nothing to worry about. Just standard corporate restructuring. Phillips knows what he's doing. Amanda nodded, probably already imagining her next promotion. James says it's all positive changes. More opportunities for people who deserve them. James, her fiancé, the department head who'd been cooking the books for years, helping hide Meridian's real financial situation. We had a special file on him, thick with evidence of creative accounting and conveniently misplaced audit reports. I checked my watch. A simple Timex that made my mother wince every time she saw it. In exactly 14 hours, their whole world would shift on its axis. You could still come back, Dad said, his voice carrying that familiar mix of judgment and what he thought was paternal concern. I'm sure we could find something entry-level. Better than whatever you're making with your little business. I smiled faintly. My little business had cleared $300 million in profit last quarter. Tomorrow, it would add Meridian's $2.8 billion in assets to its portfolio. I appreciate the offer, I said, standing slowly. But I should head out. Early meeting tomorrow. Oh. Mom perked up. With one of your clients? I gathered my coat, a plain black wool piece that concealed its Burberry origin. Something like that. A company acquisition. Acquisition. Amanda laughed. You mean like consulting on someone else's deal? No, I said softly. Like buying a company. They all laughed. The kind of laugh reserved for children with big dreams or fools who didn't know their place. Don't get ahead of yourself, Dad warned. Leave the real business to people who understand it. People like your sister. I walked to the door, then paused. You know what's interesting about real business, Dad? Sometimes the biggest moves happen in complete silence. He waved me off, already turning back to Amanda's engagement story. As I drove home in my modest Honda, my Aston Martin safely garaged at my real house across town, I thought about tomorrow. About the moment Gregory Phillips would walk into the boardroom and announce the acquisition. About the look on my father's face when his boss of 30 years would bow and call me ma'am. But mostly I thought about the email I'd received an hour ago from our forensic accounting team. The one detailing every financial irregularity they'd uncovered, including the creative bookkeeping in Amanda's department. I pulled into my Cover Apartments parking lot, the small one-bedroom where I received mail and kept up appearances for my family. Tomorrow I would walk into Meridian Tech not as Sarah Stevens, the disappointment, but as S.E. Stevens, the CEO of Shadow Peak Ventures and new owner of their entire company. The mask was finally coming off, and family dinner would never be the same again. The morning sun cast long shadows across Meridian Tech's glass facade as I pulled into the executive parking garage. Today I drove the Aston Martin. No more pretense. The security guard did a double take. He was used to seeing me in my Honda during the weeks I'd spent quietly observing the company's operations. Miss Stevens. He blinked, checking his list. You're on the executive access list. I smiled, accepting the premium parking pass. New protocol as of this morning. My heels clicked against polished marble as I crossed the lobby. Gone was the modest blazer and simple slacks I'd worn to family dinner. Today I wore power. A tailored Alexander McQueen suit in deep navy, Louboutins that cost more than my father's monthly salary, and my grandmother's vintage Cartier watch, the only piece of family heritage I'd kept. Sarah. I turned to find Amanda's fiancé, James, staring at me from near the elevator bank. His usual smug expression faltered as he took in my appearance. What are you doing here? He asked, confusion evident. And why are you dressed like someone who belongs? I finished for him. I have a meeting with Gregory Phillips. He laughed, but it sounded hollow. There must be some mistake. Mr. Phillips doesn't take unscheduled. Ma'am, a crisp voice cut through. The board is waiting. Gregory Phillips himself stood at the elevator holding the door. I watched James's face drain of color as his boss, my soon-to-be employee, bowed slightly in my direction. After you, Miss Stevens. The executive floor was a hive of activity. Board members in expensive suits clutched folders and whispered in corners. My father, stationed at his usual desk outside the main conference room, nearly dropped his coffee mug when he saw me walk past. Sarah. He stood abruptly. What are you? Not now, Stevens. Phillips cut him off. Miss Stevens has a meeting. The conference room fell silent as I entered. 24 pairs of eyes watched me take my place at the head of the table. My CFO, Marcus, sat to my right, our legal team arranged along one side. The acquisition papers lay before each seat, Shadow Peak's logo gleaming in silver foil. Good morning, I said, my voice carrying the weight of $2.8 billion in leveraged authority. Shall we begin? One moment, James interrupted from the doorway, Amanda now beside him. They must have called her down in a panic. There has to be some mistake. Sarah's not, she can't be. Sarah Elizabeth Stevens, Phillips announced, reading from the official documents. CEO of Shadow Peak Ventures and, pending these signatures, the new owner of Meridian Technologies. The room erupted in murmurs. Through the glass walls I could see my father gripping his desk for support. "That's impossible," Amanda said sharply. "She's nothing. She just does small-time consulting." I opened my laptop, projecting our findings onto the main screen. "Actually, I specialize in identifying undervalued companies with..." I paused, clicking to a particular spreadsheet. "Interesting financial discrepancies." James went rigid as his department's numbers filled the screen. 5 years of manipulated reports, all highlighted in damning red. "We'll be doing a complete audit," Marcus added smoothly. "Starting with the financial department." Amanda's perfect mask cracked. "Daddy," she turned to our father who had wandered into the doorway. "Do something." But he just stood there, 30 years of assumptions crumbling around him as his boss handed me a pen. "Miss Stevens," Philip said formally. "Would you like to sign first?" I took the pen, its weight familiar in my hand. "Before I do," I said, addressing the room but looking directly at my father, "I want to be clear about my vision for Meridian. This company has potential, but it's been held back by outdated thinking, by promoting based on politics rather than merit, by allowing certain individuals to operate without oversight." My gaze shifted to James, who had the decency to look terrified. "That changes today." I signed my name with the same flourish I'd practiced in my childhood bedroom, dreaming of moments exactly like this. The same signature that would soon appear on every employee's paycheck, including my father's. "Welcome to the new Meridian Technologies," Phillips announced to the board. As the papers made their rounds, Amanda stormed out, James trailing behind her. My father remained frozen in the doorway, his face a complex map of emotions I'd never seen before. "Mr. Stevens," I said calmly, using his professional name for the first time, "please have my afternoon schedule cleared. I'll need the company-wide meeting moved to 2 p.m. He stared at me, this daughter he'd never really seen, now sitting in the position he'd spent 3 decades trying to get close to. "Yes," he stammered. "Yes, ma'am." The word hung in the air between us, heavy with 3 decades of dismissal and disappointment. I turned back to the board, ready to begin the real work. Now about those audit findings. The next few hours moved like a carefully orchestrated symphony. Every department head was called in for individual meetings, each one leaving my new office with a different shade of shock on their face. The company-wide email went out at noon. "Shadow Peak Ventures acquires Meridian Technologies. Meet your new CEO." I watched through my floor-to-ceiling windows as the news rippled through the building. Employees huddled around computers, phones lit up with messages, and somewhere 17 floors below, my sister was probably having the meltdown of her life. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. "Come in," I called, not turning from the window. "Miss Stevens," my father's voice wavered. "Your 2 p.m. company meeting is set up in the main auditorium." I turned slowly. He looked smaller somehow, his usual confidence replaced by something that looked almost like fear. "Thank you," I said professionally. "And the executive files I requested?" He placed a thick folder on my desk, his hands trembling slightly. "All here. Every promotion record and salary adjustment from the past 5 years. Including, I knew, the paperwork for Amanda's suspiciously rapid rise through the ranks." "Excellent." I sat down at what used to be Philip's desk. "Please send in Marcus and the HR director." "Sarah," he started, then caught himself. "Miss Stevens." Yes. How long? How long have you been planning this?" I met his eyes steadily. "Remember when you told me I was wasting my time with that consulting thing? I had already made my first million. When you suggested I take an entry-level position here. I had just acquired my 3rd company. And last month at Mom's birthday, when you said I needed to learn about real business from Amanda." I smiled faintly. I was finalizing this deal. He sank into one of the guest chairs, uninvited. "Why didn't you tell us? Would you have believed me?" I asked quietly. "Or would you have done what you always did? Dismiss it, minimize it, explain why Amanda's path was better? But your apartment, your car, your clothes were a cover. Did you ever wonder why I never invited you to my place? Why I always met you at that small cafe downtown? Why I drove that Honda to every family dinner?" Understanding dawned on his face. "You've been living a double life." "No," I corrected him. "I've been living my real life. You just never bothered to see it." Another knock. Marcus entered with Janet from HR, both carrying laptops. The audit team has finished their preliminary review, Marcus announced. You'll want to see this. I nodded to my father. That will be all, Mr. Stevens. He stood slowly, years of hierarchy training battling with parental instinct. The family dinner. This Sunday. I'll be there, I said, turning my attention to the reports. And this time I'll come as myself. The afternoon unfolded like a series of controlled explosions. The audit revealed years of financial manipulation, most stemming from James's department. By 1:30 p.m., security was escorting him out of the building, his engagement ring to Amanda suddenly worth more than his frozen assets. At 2 p.m. sharp, I stood before the entire company in the main auditorium. 3,000 employees, from janitors to executives, all watching as their new reality took shape. Change, I began, my voice carrying through the perfect acoustics, is often uncomfortable. But comfort rarely leads to growth. I outlined my vision for the new Meridian: merit-based promotions, transparent financials, increased R&D investment, and a complete restructuring of the executive team. Some of you have risen through connection rather than contribution. My eyes found Amanda in the crowd, her face a mask of fury. That ends today. Your previous position will not guarantee your future one. Your last name will not secure your next promotion. Starting tomorrow, every role will be evaluated based on performance alone. The energy in the room shifted. Hope from those who'd been overlooked, fear from those who'd been overvalued. My door will be open to every employee with an idea worth hearing, I continued. Because innovation doesn't care about hierarchy, and neither do I. As the meeting ended, I watched Amanda charge toward the stage, but security, my security, smoothly intercepted her. This is because of me, isn't it? She hissed, loud enough for nearby employees to hear. You're just jealous. You always have been. I approached her calmly, aware of the audience we'd attracted. No, Amanda. This is business. Your department will be audited like everyone else's. If your promotions were earned, you have nothing to worry about. Dad won't let you do this. Dad, I said softly, works for me now. That evening, as the sun set over Chicago's skyline, I finally drove to my real home, a penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan. My assistant had already moved my things from the cover apartment, erasing the last traces of my constructed persona. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. We need to talk about what happened today. Then another, your sister is devastated. And finally one from Dad. I didn't know. All these years I didn't know. I poured myself a glass of the same wine they'd served at dinner last night, except mine was the original vintage, not the knockoff they'd bought to impress Amanda's fiancé. Miss Stevens, my house AI system announced. Marcus is on the line with the final numbers from today's audit. I smiled, taking in the view of my city. Put him through. Tomorrow the real work would begin. Restructuring Meridian, implementing new policies, rebuilding what years of favoritism had eroded. It wouldn't be easy and it wouldn't be quiet. But I was done being quiet. I was done being the family disappointment. I was finally fully myself. And Sunday dinner? Well, that would be interesting. Because this time I wasn't coming as the daughter they'd dismissed. I was coming as the woman who owned their entire world. And I had 15 years of truth to serve alongside the roast. The crystal chandelier cast judgmental shadows across my parents' formal dining room as I took my usual seat, the one furthest from my father's position at the head of the table. The family emergency meeting invitation had arrived yesterday, written in my mother's perfect cursive, dripping with the kind of concern that felt more like criticism. Olivia, darling. My mother's voice carried that familiar note of disappointment as she adjusted the elaborate flower centerpiece. You could have at least worn something more presentable. I glanced down at my simple white shirt and black pants. The outfit probably cost more than her entire wardrobe, but they'd never know that. Just like they'd never bothered to ask what I really did with my little online business for the past 4 years. My sister Victoria swept in, designer heels clicking against the hardwood floors, Hermes bag swinging from her arm. As the CFO of our father's investment firm, she was everything I supposedly wasn't: successful, ambitious, properly focused on the family legacy. Still running that little Etsy shop or whatever it is? She smirked, settling into her chair. Selling homemade crafts to bored housewives? I took a slow sip of water, letting her words roll off me like they had for years. If she only knew about the meeting I'd had this morning with the Forbes editorial team, or the photo shoot scheduled for tomorrow. "Let's get started," my father announced, his voice carrying the weight of 30 years as CEO of Harrison Financial Group. "We're here because we're concerned about Olivia's situation." There was my situation. That's what they'd been calling my decision to leave a proper corporate job and start my own company. 4 years of subtle jabs, worried phone calls, and not-so-subtle hints about real careers with actual benefits. "The family reputation is important," my mother added, wringing her hands. "And frankly, dear, this phase of yours, it's beginning to affect our standing in certain circles." I thought about the acquisition papers sitting in my real office. Not the small home office they'd never visited, but the entire top floor of the glass tower downtown. The documents that would shake the financial world to its core in exactly 2 hours. "We've been patient," Victoria chimed in, examining her manicure. "Hoping you'd come to your senses. Return to a respectable position, maybe even join the family firm." My phone buzzed silently. A message from Marcus, my COO. "Everything's set. Press embargo lifts at 6 p.m. I checked my watch. 1 hour and 57 minutes until everything changed. "The thing is, sweetheart," Dad leaned forward, his voice taking on that patronizing tone he used with difficult clients. "We've found you a position. Junior analyst at Harrison Financial. You can start Monday." I studied his face, wondering if he'd even recognize the woman who would be featured in tomorrow's business section. The one they were calling a visionary, a market disruptor, the future of financial technology. "Did you know," I said carefully, "that Forbes is announcing their most powerful women list today?" Victoria waved her hand dismissively. "Of course. I've been shortlisted 3 years running." She hadn't, but no one corrected her. "Though I doubt that's relevant to your craft business." "Actually," my mother interrupted, "we need to discuss something more immediate. The country club board meeting is tomorrow, and people have been asking questions about what you do." I bit back a smile, thinking of the country club. The same one my company had quietly purchased last month through a subsidiary, along with half the properties in their precious gated community. "What do you tell them?" I asked innocently. "Well," she flustered, "we try to be vague. It's easier than explaining that our daughter sells." "What is it you sell exactly?" "Financial technology solutions," I said simply. "Shopify websites for small businesses," Victoria corrected with a smirk. "Let's call it what it is." My phone buzzed again. "Marcus, news outlets are prepped. Your profile's going live in major financial papers simultaneously with the Forbes announcement." "The point is," Dad cut in, "this has gone on long enough. You're 32 years old, Olivia. Time to join the real world." "The real world," I repeated softly, thinking of my company's current valuation. The one that would make headlines in less than 2 hours. "Yes, the real world," Victoria emphasized. "Where success is measured in actual numbers, not Instagram likes." Just then, everyone's phones chimed simultaneously. Breaking news alerts. Major financial technology acquisition to be announced at 6 p.m. Sources say largest deal in industry history. "Speaking of real numbers," I murmured, watching Victoria scramble to read the alert. "How's Harrison Financial's tech division performing these days?" Dad frowned, glancing at his phone. "We're holding our own. Though this announcement might affect market positioning." "White." I raised an eyebrow. "An acquisition this size will redefine the entire industry. Every financial institution will have to adapt or become obsolete." "And how would you know that?" Victoria scoffed. "From your extensive experience selling digital templates?" I stood slowly, smoothing my simple white shirt. "I should head back to the office. Busy evening ahead." "Sit down," Dad commanded. "We're not finished discussing your future." "Actually," I gathered my things, "I think the future is about to discuss itself." As I walked to the door, my mother called out, "Don't forget about the junior analyst position. They need an answer by tomorrow." I paused at the threshold, allowing myself one small smile. "I'm afraid I'll have to decline. I have a board meeting tomorrow." "My board?" "Your what?" Victoria's voice rose an octave. But I was already walking out, leaving them to their confusion. In less than 2 hours, They'd learn exactly what I'd built while they were busy undermining me. The next hour passed in a blur of final preparations. In my actual office, the penthouse suite of Genesis Tower, I reviewed the press release one last time while Marcus coordinated with our PR team. They have no idea, do they? He asked, adjusting his tie. That you're about to become the youngest female CEO of a Fortune 500 company? I thought about Victoria's smirk, my mother's embarrassment, my father's condescension. They're about to know everything, I replied, standing to face the wall of windows overlooking the city. Time to rewrite their story about me. At exactly 5:55 p.m. I stepped into the elevator. Marcus handed me a small folder, the only prop I'd need for what came next. Your sister's been calling, he said. Apparently she's seeing some strange market movements in Harrison Financial's stock. I smiled. Tell her to keep watching. The real movement hasn't even started. The elevator doors opened to reveal a lobby packed with reporters, cameras, and financial analysts. A podium waited at the center, the Genesis Financial Technologies logo displayed prominently behind it. As I walked to the podium, my phone buzzed one last time. A message from Dad. Something big is happening in the fintech sector. Could affect our market position. Perhaps we should discuss that analyst role sooner rather than later. I slipped the phone into my pocket without replying. He'd find out soon enough exactly how the market was about to change. The cameras flashed as I took my place. Somewhere across the city in my parents' formal dining room, my family was probably gathered around Victoria's phone, waiting to see who this mystery buyer was. I smiled directly into the cameras, knowing the moment had finally arrived. Good evening, I began, my voice clear and confident. I'm Olivia Harrison, CEO of Genesis Financial Technologies. The rest would be history. The aftermath was immediate and electric. As I concluded the press conference, announcing not just Genesis Financial Technologies' $8.2 billion acquisition of our largest competitor, but also our revolutionary AI-driven banking platform, my phone exploded with notifications. 52 missed calls from Dad. 38 from Mom. 67 from Victoria. 241 text messages and counting. I sat in my office watching the city lights flicker to life while Marcus brought in the evening's news coverage. Tech prodigy Olivia Harrison emerges as fintech's newest power player. Genesis Financial's AI banking platform reshapes industry. Harrison Financial Group faces uncertain future as competitor falls to founder's daughter. Your father's on his third attempt to get past security, Marcus reported, setting down a fresh espresso. Victoria's threatened to call the police if we don't let her up. I picked up my phone, scanning the messages. From Dad, what have you done? This is impossible. Call me immediately. From Mom, darling, we're all so proud. Why didn't you tell us? The country club board will be thrilled. From Victoria, you manipulative little. How long have you been planning this? This is sabotage. Ms. Harrison, my assistant's voice came through the intercom. The Forbes photographer is here for tomorrow's cover shoot. I stood, moving to the window. From here I could see Harrison Financial's headquarters, the building where I'd once been offered a junior analyst position. Where Victoria still thought she ruled the financial world. Send him up, I replied. And Marcus? Bring me the market analysis from today's trading. The numbers were staggering. Genesis's stock had soared 40% after my announcement. Our AI banking platform was being hailed as revolutionary. And Harrison Financial, well, they'd lost 25% of their value in 2 hours. My phone rang, the private line only 5 people had access to. The caller ID showed Elizabeth Chin, Forbes editor-in-chief. Olivia, she said warmly when I answered. The story's ready for tomorrow. The Silent Revolution. How Olivia Harrison built a financial empire while her family wasn't looking. Any last quotes you'd like to add? I thought about that afternoon's family meeting. About all the meetings before it where they dismissed and diminished me. Just one, I replied. Success doesn't need permission. It just needs patience. After the photo shoot, Marcus brought in the latest analysis. 3 major banks had already reached out about implementing our AI platform. 6 more wanted partnership discussions. Your sister's giving interviews, he noted, pulling up a financial news channel. Trying to spin this as some kind of family collaboration. On screen, Victoria stood outside Harrison Financial's headquarters, her perfect composure cracking slightly. Of course we knew about Olivia's venture. The Harrison family has always supported innovation. I muted the TV. Send her the cease and desist letter. No unauthorized statements about Genesis or my role here. Already done. Also, your mother's posted 7 times on social media about her brilliant daughter who takes after me. I smiled wryly. Funny how quickly craft business becomes brilliant venture when the numbers have 9 zeros. A knock at my door interrupted us. Miss Harrison? Your father's here again. He's brought your grandfather. That made me pause. Alexander Harrison Sr., the patriarch who'd started Harrison Financial Group 40 years ago. The man who'd first taught me about market patterns and financial strategies, before my father and sister decided I wasn't suited for finance. Send them up, I said after a moment's consideration. And Marcus? Get me the Harrison Financial Acquisition proposal. While waiting, I studied my reflection in the window. Still wearing that simple white shirt that had so disappointed my mother this afternoon. Amazing how different the same outfit looked when framed by a billion-dollar view. The door opened. Dad stepped in first, looking smaller somehow in my vast office. But Grandpa walked in with a hint of a smile playing at his lips. The quiet one, he said softly, looking around at my empire. Always watching, always learning. I wondered when you'd show them. Dad's head snapped up. You knew. Known since she was 12, Grandpa eased himself into a chair. When she corrected my market analysis over breakfast. You were too busy praising Victoria's new haircut to notice. I sat behind my desk, watching my father struggle to reconcile his narrative about me with the reality before him. Why? He finally asked. Why the deception? Deception. I echoed. I built this company openly. Filed all the proper paperwork. Even used our family name. You just never bothered to look beyond your own assumptions. But your little online business was a subsidiary. One small part of Genesis that I let you see. The perfect cover for a family that wouldn't understand or accept what I was really building. Grandpa chuckled. And now you own the country club where they wouldn't even give you a full membership. Dad's head snapped up again. What? Genesis acquired it last month, I confirmed. Along with most of the properties in that gated community you're so proud of. Amazing what you can buy when no one takes you seriously enough to check the buyer's identity. This will destroy Harrison Financial, Dad said quietly. No, I corrected, sliding a folder across the desk. This will save it. If you're smart enough to take the offer. He opened the folder with trembling hands, reading the acquisition proposal I'd had prepared for weeks. A merger, he whispered. Harrison Financial becomes part of Genesis, I explained. You keep the name, keep some autonomy, but ultimately join the future instead of fighting it. And if we refuse? I pulled up our AI platform demo on my screen. Then you compete against technology that's already revolutionizing banking. Against a company that's now worth 4 times yours. Against the future itself. Victoria will never accept this, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Victoria just lost your 3 biggest clients to us this afternoon, I replied calmly. They signed transfer papers right after my press conference. She doesn't have to accept it. The board will do that for her. Grandpa leaned forward, eyes twinkling. You've orchestrated quite a checkmate, my dear. I learned from the best, I smiled at him. You always said to watch the quiet ones. They see everything while everyone else is busy talking. A knock interrupted us, Marcus, with more market updates. Genesis stock was up another 15% in after-hours trading. Harrison Financial had been downgraded by 3 major analysts. Think about the offer, I told my father as he stood to leave. You have until morning. After that, the terms become less generous. At the door he paused. That junior analyst position was beneath me 4 years ago, I finished for him. Just like it was beneath me today. The difference is now you know why. After they left, I turned back to the window, watching the city sparkle beneath me. Tomorrow would bring more challenges, more family drama, more attempts to rewrite history. But for now, sitting in my office in my simple white shirt, I was exactly where I needed to be. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't proving people wrong. It's letting them realize they never really knew you at all. The morning after my revelation dawned bright and cold, much like the reception waiting for me in the business world. The Forbes cover had dropped at midnight. My face, wearing that same simple white shirt above the headline, "The Silent Revolution: How a Daughter Built an Empire While Her Family Built Excuses." I arrived at Genesis Tower early, passing through the crowd of reporters still camped outside. Inside my office, Marcus waited with the morning briefing. "Victoria's on CNBC," he reported. "Trying to claim she was your secret mentor all along. Says she guided your development from behind the scenes." I sipped my coffee, watching the interview on mute. My sister looked polished as ever, but there was a desperation in her eyes that even perfect makeup couldn't hide. And the numbers? Genesis stock up another 30% at opening. Harrison Financial. He paused, down 45%. Their board is meeting in an hour to discuss our merger offer. My phone buzzed, a text from Mom. "Darling, the country club is absolutely buzzing. I've already been approached about joining 3 charity boards. When can we schedule a proper family photo shoot for the society pages?" I deleted it without responding. "Your grandfather's here," my assistant announced through the intercom. "And he's brought some interesting documents." Grandpa walked in carrying a worn leather briefcase I remembered from my childhood, the one he'd used to teach me about market analysis while everyone else was busy praising Victoria's latest accomplishments. "Thought you might want these," he said, laying out old papers on my desk. "Your first market prediction model. Age 12. The one that correctly forecast the 2008 crash 3 months before it happened." I picked up the faded papers, covered in my careful childhood handwriting. "You kept these, along with every business proposal you wrote in high school. The AI banking concept you developed in college." He smiled. "The same AI system that's now worth billions. Does Dad know you had these?" He never asked. Too busy grooming Victoria to be his mirror image. Grandpa sat down heavily. "They're voting on your offer right now, you know. At Harrison Financial." I nodded, pulling up the live feed from their boardroom on my screen. Benefits of owning the building's security system, another acquisition they'd never noticed. Victoria stood at the head of the table, gesturing frantically. Even without audio, I could read her lips. "This is a hostile takeover. We can't let her win." Speaking of winning, Grandpa nodded toward my phone. "Your mother's redecorated her social media with your Forbes cover. Though she's carefully cropped out the part where you mentioned their lack of support." "Some things never change," I murmured just as my assistant buzzed again. "Ms. Harrison? The Harrison Financial Board vote is in." I straightened in my chair, watching the feed. The board chairman was standing now, Victoria slumped in her seat, Dad staring blankly ahead. "They accepted," my assistant confirmed. "Full merger year terms. They want to announce immediately to stop their stock's decline." Grandpa chuckled. "Well played, my dear. Now what?" "Now," I pressed the intercom, "send in the transition team. And Marcus? Start the integration protocol we discussed." Within hours, Genesis teams were moving through Harrison Financial's offices. Victoria was escorted out. She'd be offered a position eventually, but not before she learned some humility. Dad was named Chairman Emeritus, a title with prestige but no power. As for me, I had an empire to run. The next few weeks transformed both companies. Our AI platform revolutionized Harrison's outdated systems. The merged entity's stock soared. And my family, well, they learned to live with a new kind of daughter. Mom stopped arranging suitable marriages and started asking about suitable investments. Victoria, stripped of her CFO title but learning actual finance in a junior role, discovered she had talents when she wasn't just playing politics. A month after the merger, I stood in my office reviewing the latest success metrics when my assistant announced one final visitor. "Your sister's here. Says it's important." Victoria walked in looking different somehow. The designer labels were gone, replaced by simple professional attire. The arrogance had faded from her stance. "I've been going through the AI platform documentation," she said without preamble. It's brilliant. I never understood what you were trying to explain all those years ago." "You never tried to understand," I corrected gently. "None of you did." She nodded slowly. "I know. And I'm sorry. Not because you won, but because I wasted years trying to be Dad's copy instead of learning to be myself." I studied her for a moment. The junior analyst position is still open. The real one, not the fake one they offered me. Interested. You trust me? After everything. Trust is earned, I replied. Just like success. Are you ready to earn both? She straightened, and for the first time I saw something of myself in her stance. Yes, I am. Then welcome to Genesis. I held out my hand. Leave your assumptions at the door. That evening I added the Forbes cover to my wall of achievements, right next to those childhood market predictions Grandpa had saved. Below it I hung a simple white shirt framed, the one from that last family meeting. My phone buzzed, a message from Marcus about tomorrow's Global Finance Summit where I'd be giving the keynote speech. The topic? The power of being underestimated, how silence builds success. I smiled, remembering all those family dinners where they talked over me, around me, through me. They never noticed that the quiet one taking notes was actually taking control. Their mistake. My legacy. And as I looked out over my city, watching the lights come on in buildings I now owned, I knew this was just the beginning. Because sometimes success isn't about proving your family wrong. It's about proving yourself right even when no one else believes you can. 6 months later, Genesis had become the largest financial technology company in the world. Our AI platform had revolutionized banking. Victoria was excelling in her new role, learning to build her own success instead of copying others. And my parents, well, they'd learned to ask about my achievements instead of assuming my failures. As for me, I kept that simple white shirt as a reminder. Not of where I came from, but of how far I'd gone while they weren't looking. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't in proving people wrong. It's in building something so right that they can't help but acknowledge their own mistakes. And I was just getting started. The mahogany conference table gleamed under the crystal chandelier as I took my usual seat at the far end, away from the real family business. The Whitmore Trust building still intimidated most people who entered its marble lobby, but I'd been coming to these monthly meetings since I was 18. Now at 31 I knew exactly why I'd been summoned today. My father, Charles Whitmore III, sat at the head of the table in his hand-tailored suit, radiating the authority that came with managing one of the region's oldest family trusts. To his right sat my brother Marcus, golden child and heir apparent, wearing his Harvard MBA like a crown. My sister Victoria perched beside him, her designer everything screaming "Look at me, wealth." And then there was me. Isabella Whitmore, the family disappointment in my off-the-rack blazer and sensible shoes. Thank you all for coming, Dad began, his voice carrying the weight of generations of Whitmore authority. We have some important family business to discuss. I already knew what was coming. The whispered phone calls between Marcus and Victoria over the past month hadn't been as discreet as they thought. The concerned emails about my lifestyle choices and concerning independence had made their way back to me through well-meaning cousins. As you know, Dad continued, pulling out a leather portfolio, the Whitmore Trust has supported this family for 4 generations. It's a privilege that comes with responsibilities. Victoria nodded eagerly, her perfectly styled blonde hair catching the light. She'd never worked a day in her life but had strong opinions about responsibility. However, Dad's voice hardened. Some family members seem to have forgotten that privilege requires proper behavior, proper associations, and proper respect for family values. Here it came. Marcus leaned forward, unable to hide his satisfaction. Dad, maybe you should just get to the point. Very well. Dad opened the portfolio and pulled out official-looking documents. Isabella, your continued defiance of family expectations, your refusal to take a proper position in our business, and your insistence on living like. He paused, searching for the right word, like a common person has forced us to make a difficult decision. I said nothing, keeping my face neutral. I'd learned long ago that emotional reactions only gave them ammunition. Effective immediately, Dad announced, you are being removed from the family trust. No more monthly allowances, no more financial safety net, no more support from this family. The silence that followed was supposed to be dramatic. Victoria practically vibrated with excitement, while Marcus tried to look appropriately solemn. Furthermore, Dad continued, your trust fund, which was set to transfer fully to your control at 35, will instead be redistributed between Marcus and Victoria. They understand the importance of maintaining the Whitmore legacy. I looked around the table at their expectant faces. They were waiting for me to break down, to beg, to finally submit to their idea of who I should be. Instead, I reached for my phone. "Isabella," Victoria said sharply, "this is serious. Put that away and address what Dad just said." I ignored her, opening my banking app. "Actually, this is interesting timing." "Timing?" Marcus scoffed. "What's interesting about finally facing reality?" I turned my phone screen toward them, displaying my primary checking account balance. The number was clear, undeniable, and substantial enough to make Victoria gasp. "Isabella," Dad said slowly, "what exactly am I looking at?" "My checking account," I said calmly. "One of them, anyway." Marcus squinted at the screen. That's impossible. You work at some nonprofit. You drive a 10-year-old Honda." I swiped to my savings account. The number was even larger. "Where?" Victoria's voice cracked. "Where did this money come from?" Instead of answering, I pulled out my laptop and opened a presentation I'd been preparing for months, just in case this day came. "Let me show you something," I said, connecting to the conference room's display system. "This is Meridian Financial Services. Small investment firm, started 8 years ago with initial capital of $50,000. The company logo filled the screen, along with financial charts showing steady, impressive growth. Dad leaned forward. "I've never heard of Meridian Financial." "Not surprising. We specialize in quiet wealth management for clients who prefer privacy over publicity." I clicked to the next slide showing our client roster. Fortune 500 companies, government entities, high-net-worth individuals who don't want their financial strategies broadcasted. Marcus was reading over his glasses. "Isabella, why are you showing us this?" "Because," I clicked to the ownership structure, "I founded it. I own it. And for the past 5 years, Meridian Financial has been quietly managing investments that have generated enough income to fund something rather interesting." Victoria's face had gone pale. "Fund what?" I smiled, clicking to the final slide. A complex financial flowchart appeared, showing money transfers, account numbers, and payment schedules. At the top, in bold letters, "Whitmore Family Expense Analysis, past 5 years. This," I said quietly, "is where your lifestyle actually comes from." The room fell silent as they studied the chart. Lines connected my company's accounts to shell corporations, which connected to anonymous transfers, which connected to the accounts that funded their lives. "The monthly payment for Victoria's Manhattan apartment," I said using a laser pointer. "Meridian client account 7749. Victoria's mouth fell open. "Marcus's car payments, his children's private school tuition, his wife's shopping allowances. Meridian client account 8851. Marcus gripped the edge of the table. "Dad's country club memberships, mother's charity donations, the maintenance on this building, even the salary for your personal staff." I let the information sink in before continuing. "You see, the Whitmore Trust hasn't been generating significant income for over a decade. Poor management, outdated investment strategies, and excessive withdrawals have reduced it to barely break-even status." Dad's face had gone from authoritative red to ashen gray. "That's impossible. The annual reports show exactly what I told our accounting firm to show. Enough stability to maintain your dignity, nothing more." I clicked to another slide showing the trust's actual financial position. Without the anonymous supplemental funding from Meridian Financial, this family would have been bankrupt 3 years ago. Victoria stood up suddenly, her chair scraping against the floor. "You're lying. This is some kind of elaborate joke." "Is it?" I pulled up another document. "Here's the contract your apartment management company has with Aurora Holdings, one of my subsidiaries. They've been prepaying your rent annually for the past 4 years. But," she sat back down heavily, "but I thought Dad was paying for that." Dad thought the trust was paying for it. The trust thought it was coming from shrewd investments. Everyone thought someone else was handling it. Marcus found his voice. "But why would you do this without telling us?" I looked at him steadily. "Because every time I tried to discuss the family's financial situation, you dismissed me as irresponsible. Every time I suggested modernizing our investment approach, you said I didn't understand old money. Every time I offered to help, you told me to focus on my little nonprofit job. The truth was my little nonprofit job had been perfect cover. Working at a financial literacy organization had given me access to networks, strategies, and opportunities that traditional wealth management never would have provided. While my family attended charity galas, I was building relationships with the people who actually moved money in this city. So when the trust started failing, I continued, I had a choice. Let you all fall into poverty and learn humility the hard way, or quietly step in and maintain your illusions of financial security. Dad was staring at the financial charts like they were written in a foreign language. Isabella, I don't understand how you could have built something this significant without our knowledge. Because you never asked about my work. You assumed that because I chose to live modestly and work in nonprofit, I must be struggling financially. I clicked to another slide showing Meridian's complete portfolio. While you were all focused on maintaining appearances, I was building something sustainable. Something that could actually support a family legacy instead of just spending it down. Victoria's voice was small. How much are we talking about? Meridian manages just over $800 million in assets. My personal net worth is somewhere around $120 million, though it fluctuates with market conditions. The silence that followed was profound. Outside, I could hear the distant sounds of the city, people going about their normal Tuesday afternoon business, completely unaware that a family's entire understanding of itself was being dismantled in this conference room. Marcus finally spoke. So when you said you'd been funding our lifestyle, I meant literally. Your mortgage payments, your car leases, your children's education, your wife's spending, even your vacation to Tuscany last month. All of it traced back to investments I made in companies I built. Dad removed his glasses, cleaning them with shaking hands. How long have you known about the trust's problems? 6 years. I tried to bring it to your attention 5 years ago, remember? You told me I was being dramatic and didn't understand family finance. I did remember that conversation. Dad had patted my head like I was still 12 years old and told me to leave money matters to the adults. That's when I realized I had two choices, I continued. Let you face the consequences of decades of financial mismanagement, or find a way to preserve the family while building something better. Victoria was scrolling through her phone frantically. But the credit cards, the bank accounts, all showing healthy balances because of automatic transfers from accounts I control. Your credit has been maintained, your lifestyle preserved, your reputation's intact. Why? Marcus asked again. After the way we've treated you, why protect us? I thought about that question. Why had I spent years secretly supporting people who consistently dismissed and undervalued me? Because you're my family, I said simply. I didn't agree with your attitudes or your assumptions, but I wasn't going to let you lose everything because of pride and poor financial planning. Dad looked up from the charts. What happens now? That depends on you, I said, closing my laptop. You just cut me off from a trust fund that was essentially worthless anyway. You can continue thinking I'm the family disappointment who needs to learn responsibility, or you can acknowledge reality. I stood up, straightening my practical blazer. The reality is that I've been supporting this family for years while building a business that could support us for generations. The question is whether you want to be part of that future or keep living in the fantasy of past glory. Victoria was crying now, quietly but visibly. Isabella, I'm so sorry. We had no idea. You had no idea because you never asked. You assumed that because I didn't flaunt wealth, I didn't have it. You confused simplicity with failure. Marcus stood up as well. What can we do? How do we fix this? You can start by understanding that success doesn't always look like what you expect. That intelligence and capability aren't measured by how closely someone follows your predetermined path. I gathered my things, noting how different this felt from every other family meeting I'd attended. For the first time they were really seeing me. The financial support will continue, I said, heading toward the door. Because that's what family does. But the next time you want to cut someone off, you might want to check who's actually paying the bills. Dad's voice stopped me at the door. Isabella, wait. I turned back. Can you teach us? About what you've built, how you did it. For the first time all day I smiled genuinely. I'd like that, Dad. I've been waiting years for you to ask. A month later I sat in the same conference room, but everything had changed. The family trust was being restructured under my oversight. Marcus had taken a genuine interest in learning modern investment strategies. Victoria was working with our financial literacy nonprofit, discovering she had a talent for helping people understand money management. Dad Dad had become my most eager student, asking detailed questions about portfolio diversification and market analysis with the same intensity he'd once reserved for lecturing me about responsibility. "The Q3 reports look excellent," he said, reviewing documents I'd prepared. "This sustainable investment approach is generating better returns than anything we've seen in decades." "Because it's based on actual market research rather than tradition," I replied. "Money doesn't care about family names or old strategies. It responds to smart decisions and careful planning." Victoria looked up from her laptop. "Isabella, I still can't believe we didn't know about any of this. How did you manage to keep Meridian completely separate from the family name?" "Shell corporations, different legal addresses, and careful compartmentalization. I learned early that mixing family expectations with business decisions rarely ends well." Marcus nodded. "I'm starting to understand that. Working with you these past few weeks has taught me more about finance than my entire MBA program." "Because MBA programs teach theory," I said. "Building actual wealth requires understanding how money really moves in the real world." Dad set down his papers and looked at me directly. "Isabella, I owe you an apology. Not just for last month but for years of not seeing who you really are." "We all owe her an apology," Victoria added. "I can't believe I was so focused on appearances that I never bothered to understand substance. I thought about the years of family dinners where I'd sat quietly while they planned my life for me. The assumptions, the dismissals, the constant pressure to conform to their vision of success. The important thing," I said, "is that we're here now, building something better together." My phone buzzed with a message from my assistant. 3 more clients wanted to transfer their portfolios to Meridian, attracted by our track record and discretion. "Speaking of building something better," I said, "we have some decisions to make about expansion. Meridian is growing faster than I anticipated." Dad leaned forward eagerly. "What kind of decisions? Whether to stay boutique and exclusive, or scale up to compete with the major wealth management firms? What do you think?" Marcus asked. I looked around the table at my family, the same people who'd tried to cut me off just weeks ago, now hanging on my every word about financial strategy. "I think," I said, "we have the foundation to build something remarkable. Something that could establish the Whitmore name in finance for the next century, not just preserve it from the last one." Victoria smiled. "I like the sound of that. Then let's get to work," I said, opening my laptop. "I'll show you what real wealth building looks like." As I began explaining my expansion plans, I reflected on how dramatically everything had changed. The family that had once seen me as a disappointment now recognized me as their salvation. The trust fund I'd supposedly lost access to had been replaced by something far more valuable. A business I'd built myself and a family that finally understood my worth. Sometimes the best response to being cut off isn't begging to be let back in. It's proving that you were never dependent on their approval in the first place. And sometimes, the most powerful revenge is success so complete that it transforms your critics into your most devoted students. The next morning, I arrived at Meridian's offices to find an email from Dad. "Isabella, after reviewing everything you've built, I have one question. Would you consider letting me work for you? I'd like to learn what real financial management looks like. Your proud father, Charles." I smiled, typing back, "Dad, you've been working for me for 5 years. You just didn't know it. Welcome to the team. Your daughter, the CO." Outside my office window, the city stretched out like a map of possibilities. Somewhere out there were other families struggling with outdated financial strategies, other trust funds bleeding money, other young adults being underestimated by people who confused tradition with wisdom. I had work to do, wealth to build, and a family legacy to transform from something that lived in the past to something that would thrive in the future. The girl they'd tried to cut off from the family trust had become the woman who saved it. And we were just getting started. The mahogany conference table in my uncle's law office had been set up like a corporate tribunal. I walked into the sterile room to find my entire family arranged in what could only be described as an intervention formation. Uncle Marcus sat at the head like a judge, my parents flanked him like prosecutors, and my cousins served as the jury. I'm Isabella Torres, though my family had taken to referring to me as our niece who's having some struggles at their social gatherings. At 28, I was apparently the family disappointment for choosing to build a tech company instead of following their traditional path into law, medicine, or finance. "Isabella, thank you for coming," Uncle Marcus said, gesturing to the single chair facing the assembled group. His corner office overlooked downtown, all glass and steel, a monument to the success he'd built with Torres and Associates, the family law firm. I settled into the chair, noting how they'd positioned me like a defendant facing judgment. My phone sat face up on the table beside me, volume turned up as always for business calls. In 3 hours I had a board meeting with my investors. In 6 hours the biggest announcement of my career would go live. But they saw my casual clothes and assumed crisis. "We asked you here because we're concerned," my mother Elena began, her perfectly manicured hands folded like she was delivering bad news. "About your startup, about your future, about these risky decisions you've been making." My father Carlos nodded gravely from his seat. "Mija, we've been patient. We understood you needed to explore this tech phase. But it's time to face reality." Tech phase. That's what they called Quantum Dynamics, the artificial intelligence company I'd founded 4 years ago. They saw me working from coffee shops and assumed I was playing entrepreneur while burning through savings. My cousin David leaned forward, his Harvard law ring catching the afternoon light. "The numbers don't lie, Isabella. Small tech startups have a 90% failure rate. It's not personal, it's just statistics. And the market is saturated," added my cousin Maria, fresh from her MBA program. "AI companies are a dime a dozen now. Without serious backing or connections, it's almost impossible to break through." If only they knew that quantum dynamics had quietly revolutionized machine learning for 3 of the world's largest tech corporations. But they heard artificial intelligence and thought I was building chatbots in my apartment. Uncle Marcus stood up, assuming his courtroom stance. "We've arranged this meeting because tough love is sometimes necessary. Your startup is clearly failing and it's time to cut your losses." The irony would have been funny if it weren't so painful. The family that prided itself on logic and evidence had never bothered to research what I actually did. They saw me decline their job offers and assumed desperation. "I've spoken to Judge Harrison about a clerk position," Uncle Marcus continued. "It's entry-level, but it's a foot in the door. Real legal experience with real prospects." My Aunt Carmen nodded enthusiastically. "And my hospital always needs administrators. Healthcare is stable, Isabella. It's not like these risky tech ventures." My phone lay silent on the table, but I knew in exactly 17 minutes, my life would change forever. The Forbes announcement was scheduled for 3:47 p.m. Pacific Time, and the advanced copy was already sitting in journalists' inboxes worldwide. "We're here because your startup is clearly failing," Uncle Marcus declared with the finality of a court verdict. "Time for tough love. Time to accept that not everyone is cut out for entrepreneurship." My parents exchanged meaningful looks. Mom dabbed at her eyes with a tissue she'd apparently prepared in advance. "We've discussed this as a family," Dad said softly. "We're prepared to help you transition back to a more stable career path. Cover your apartment for a few months while you get back on your feet." Back on my feet. I bit back a smile, thinking about the $847 million in venture funding sitting in Quantum Dynamics accounts, or the acquisition offers I'd been declining for the past 6 months. "The tech bubble is bursting," David added helpfully. "Anyone with sense is getting out now before it gets worse." Maria pulled out her tablet, displaying charts and graphs. "I did a market analysis. AI startups are dropping like flies. The smart money is moving to traditional sectors." They'd done a market analysis of an industry they didn't understand, looking for a company they'd never properly researched, reaching conclusions that would be hilarious if they weren't so wrong. "Isabella," Uncle Marcus said, sitting back down and leaning forward with practiced sincerity. "We love you. That's why we're doing this. Sometimes family has to step in when someone can't see their situation clearly." My phone rang. The sharp tone cut through the intervention like a knife. Everyone turned to look at the device vibrating against the mahogany table. I glanced at the caller ID and smiled slightly. Right on schedule. "Excuse me," I said politely. "I should take this." "Isabella," Uncle Marcus protested. "We're in the middle of a serious conversation." "So am I," I replied, answering the call and putting it on speaker. "This is Isabella Torres." "Miss Torres. This is Jennifer Walsh from Forbes magazine." The voice filled the room with crystalline clarity. "I'm calling with the most exciting news. Congratulations. You've made the Forbes billionaire list for 2024. The room went dead silent. Every face around the table froze in identical expressions of shock. Uncle Marcus's mouth fell open. Mom's tissue fluttered to the floor. David's Harvard ring clinked against his water glass as his hand trembled. Based on our independent valuation of quantum dynamics and your personal holdings, Jennifer continued, oblivious to the drama she was causing, we've assessed your net worth at $3.2 billion, making you the youngest Latina billionaire in American history. I watched my family's faces cycle through confusion, disbelief, and slowly dawning comprehension. The story goes live in 15 minutes, Jennifer added. We've already received calls from 3 major networks requesting interviews. Your assistant said to coordinate through you directly. Thank you, Jennifer, I said calmly. I'll have my PR team send over the official photos and background materials within the hour. Wonderful. And Ms. Torres? Our readers are particularly excited about the exclusive on your AI breakthrough. The applications for autonomous vehicles alone could reshape entire industries. The technology speaks for itself, I replied, watching Uncle Marcus grip his desk as if the world had tilted. I appreciate Forbes recognizing the potential. Of course. We'll speak soon about the cover story feature. Congratulations again, Ms. Torres. This is extraordinary. I ended the call and looked around the table at their stunned faces. Sorry about that, I said conversationally. You were saying something about my failing startup? Uncle Marcus opened and closed his mouth several times before managing to speak. Billionaire list? 3.2 billion, I confirmed. Though that's based on Friday's valuation. The acquisition offers I've been fielding could push it considerably higher. Mom's hands flew to her throat. Acquisition offers? I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my emails. Microsoft, Google, Apple, and Tesla have all submitted formal proposals in the past month. Tesla's offer alone was $4.7 billion for a 60% stake. David's Harvard confidence had completely evaporated. But you work from coffee shops. You drive that old Prius. I work from coffee shops because I prefer the energy to corporate offices. I drive a Prius because it's environmentally responsible and gets excellent gas mileage. I stood up, straightening my jeans and hoodie. I also happen to own the building that houses 3 of those coffee shops, plus a portfolio of renewable energy investments worth approximately $400 million. The silence stretched on until Maria found her voice. The market analysis. I said AI startups were failing. Some are, I agreed. The ones built on hype without substance. But quantum dynamics holds 47 patents on machine learning algorithms that will power the next generation of autonomous systems. Our technology doesn't just predict market trends, it creates them. Uncle Marcus slumped back in his chair, his authority deflating like a punctured balloon. Isabella, we had no idea. No, you didn't. Because you never asked. I walked to his floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the city skyline that would soon include buildings owned by one of the companies courting my technology. You saw a young woman working unconventionally and assumed failure. You heard startup and thought risky venture, instead of revolutionary technology. My phone buzzed with a text from my assistant. 3 more interview requests, including 60 minutes. Also, the mayor's office called about the Economic Development Council position. I showed them the message. The mayor wants me to head the city's technology initiative. Something about attracting more innovation to the region. Carlos found his voice first. Mija, we were just trying to help. Help. I turned back to face them. You staged an intervention without researching my company. You offered me entry-level positions while I was building billion-dollar technology. You assumed failure based on appearance rather than evidence. Aunt Carmen spoke up hesitantly. But you never told us how successful you were. Would you have believed me? Or would you have assumed I was delusional? I sat back down, facing the tribunal that had suddenly become an audience. Besides, I thought actions spoke louder than words. Apparently I was wrong. My phone rang again. This time the caller ID showed Goldman Sachs. Excuse me, I said, answering and putting it on speaker again. Isabella Torres speaking. Ms. Torres, this is Patrick Chin from Goldman Sachs Private Wealth Management. We've been following the Forbes announcement, and we'd like to discuss managing your portfolio transition. With holdings of this magnitude, you'll need specialized strategies for tax optimization and investment diversification. Thank you, Patrick. Have my assistant schedule something for next week. We'll need to discuss the foundation planning as well. Absolutely. Congratulations on this remarkable achievement, Ms. Torres. We look forward to working with you. I ended the call and looked at my family. Foundation planning. I'm establishing the Torres Innovation Foundation to fund STEM education for underrepresented students. Initial endowment will be $200 million. The number hit them like a physical blow. Maria actually swayed in her chair. 200 million, she whispered. Education was always important to this family, I said simply. Now I can do something meaningful about it. Uncle Marcus leaned forward and I recognized the look in his eyes. It was the same expression he used when preparing to negotiate a settlement. Isabella, clearly we misunderstood your situation. But now that we know what you've built, we should discuss how the family can support you. Support? I raised an eyebrow. Like offering me clerk positions and hospital administration jobs? He had the grace to look embarrassed. We could be helpful in other ways. Legal counsel, financial planning, family connections. I have excellent legal counsel, thank you. Cravath, Swain and Moore handles my corporate work, and I have specialized IP attorneys for the patent portfolio. I stood up again, gathering my things. As for family connections, I'm building my own network based on innovation rather than tradition. My phone buzzed with another call. This time I just glanced at the screen before declining. Sorry, that was 60 minutes. I'll call them back later. The casual way I dismissed a call from one of the most prestigious news programs in America seemed to finally drive home the magnitude of what they'd missed. Isabella, Mom said softly. What happens now? With us, I mean. I looked around the table at these people who'd raised me, guided me, and ultimately underestimated me so completely. Now we learn what family really means, I said quietly. Not people who assume the worst when they don't understand. Not people who offer help they think you need instead of asking what you've actually built. But people who support each other based on love rather than judgment. David spoke up hesitantly. How do we do that? I smiled for the first time since entering the room. You could start by asking about my work. What quantum dynamics actually does. What problems we're solving. What impact we're having on the world. And we could stop assuming you need our guidance, Uncle Marcus added with something that might have been humility. That would be refreshing. I walked toward the door then paused. By the way, the judge position and hospital administration job? I appreciate the thought, but I'm a bit busy reshaping the global technology landscape. As I reached for the door handle, my phone rang one more time. The caller ID made me smile. This should be interesting, I said, putting the call on speaker. Isabella. This is the President's Science Advisor. We've been following your work with artificial intelligence applications for climate modeling. The President would like to discuss appointing you to the National Science Foundation Board. Are you available for a call with the White House tomorrow? I looked back at my family's stunned faces one more time. Let me check my calendar and get back to you. I might have some time between the Forbes photo shoot and the Senate subcommittee hearing on AI regulation. Perfect. We'll coordinate with your staff. Congratulations on the remarkable recognition, Ms. Torres. The country needs innovators like you in leadership positions. After I ended the call, the silence stretched for a full minute. Finally, Uncle Marcus spoke. Senate subcommittee? They want my input on regulating artificial intelligence development. Apparently, when you hold patents that could reshape multiple industries, lawmakers want to understand the implications. I opened the door, then turned back one last time. Sunday dinner at Mom and Dad's house this week? Mom nodded eagerly. Of course, Mija. Good. But no more interventions. No more assumptions. Just family dinner where we talk about what we're actually doing with our lives. And Isabella? Dad called after me. We're proud of you. We should have said that first. I smiled genuinely. Thank you, Dad. That means more than you know. 6 months later, I sat in the executive conference room of Quantum Dynamics' new headquarters, a gleaming tower that had become a landmark in the city's skyline. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see construction beginning on the Torres Innovation Center, a collaboration between my foundation and the local university. My assistant knocked on the door. Your family is here for the board meeting. I looked up from the acquisition proposal I'd been reviewing. Tesla had increased their offer to $6.2 billion. But I was leaning toward the partnership model instead. More impact, more control, more fun. Send them in. Uncle Marcus entered first, carrying a legal briefcase but looking far less authoritative than he had 6 months ago. He was followed by David and Maria, both of whom had joined my legal and strategy teams respectively. Mom and Dad brought up the rear, grinning like proud parents at a graduation ceremony. "How are the preparations going?" Mom asked, settling into the chair beside me. "The Senate hearing went well. 3 committees want to adopt our regulatory framework recommendations." I pulled up the news coverage on the conference room screen. And the foundation awarded its first round of scholarships yesterday. 200 students starting STEM programs this fall. David leaned forward with genuine interest. "What about the autonomous vehicle partnership?" "Signed this morning. Tesla, Ford, and Toyota are licensing our core algorithms. The first fully autonomous cars should hit the market within 18 months. Maria smiled. "The market analysis I did 6 months ago aged well, didn't it?" "Like milk," I agreed, laughing. "But you've learned to research industries before analyzing them." Uncle Marcus opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick contract. "The foundation bylaws are ready for your review. I have to say, creating a legal framework for $500 million in annual giving is incredibly complex. But worth it," Dad added. "When I see those scholarship recipients, I understand why you built all this." My phone buzzed with a familiar notification. Another Forbes alert, this time about the 40 under 40 list I'd apparently made as well. I showed them the screen. "Number 1, Mom read proudly. Our daughter, number 1 on the Forbes 40 under 40. Our niece," Uncle Marcus corrected with a smile. "The one who was clearly failing 6 months ago." I stood up, walking to the window that offered a panoramic view of the city I was helping to transform. "You know what I learned from that intervention?" "What?" Maria asked. "That sometimes the best business strategy is letting people underestimate you. It gives you space to work without interference." I turned back to face them. "But family is different. Family should see your potential even when you can't see it yourself." "And sometimes," Uncle Marcus said quietly, "family needs to learn that success comes in forms they never imagined." My phone rang again. This time the caller ID showed, "Nobel Committee." I looked at my family's expectant faces and smiled. Should I put this one on speaker too? The unanimous yes that echoed through the room told me everything I needed to know about how much had changed since that intervention 6 months ago. Some lessons I'd learned are best taught with Forbes lists and perfectly timed phone calls. But the most important lesson was that real family doesn't just celebrate your success. They learn to recognize it in the first place. And sometimes the greatest victory isn't proving people wrong about you. It's teaching them to see you clearly and then watching them become genuinely proud of what they discover. As I answered the call from Stockholm, I realized that the failing startup my family had tried to save was actually saving them. Teaching them that love isn't about controlling someone's choices, but about trusting their vision even when you can't see where it leads. The billionaire list was nice. But having family who finally understood what I'd built, that was priceless.